Volume 10. Chapter 898, Strong Attack. Chapter 898, Strong Attack. When Bihan saw the terrible state of Gongye Xiaorong Battalion, he was astounded. A battalion that suffered this level of casualties could be said to be crippled, but their faces gave him pause. Their faces were filled with sorrow and pain, but also with hate and spirit. Bihan nodded inwardly. This battalion was not crippled. When Bihan saw Gongye Xiaorong's calm expression, it proved the conclusion he reached. While he looked exhausted and fragile, his gaze was filled with determination. "Leave this to us, go rest." Bihan's voice had a hint of respect. This had nothing to do with strength. The kind of spirit and determination it took to still hold on and think of ways to force the enemy back in such a disadvantageous battle was worthy of respect. All right. Gongye Xiaorong looked at Bihan. He felt sadness. Tian Huan had declined and died. Mo Cloud C was like the sun in the sky. The change was something that people who were inside Tian Huan felt more deeply. Bihan seemed to see what Gongye Xiaorong was thinking and said, "Your equipment and resources have arrived. Pick your own soldiers. If you are fast, you can still return to this big war." Bihan's tone was cold, but Gongye Xiaorong could hear the care inside it. Gongye Xiaorong became alert. Bihan was right. This war had just started. If they finished recovering fast enough, they could still make it in time. This battle was important to him and Tian Huan. "Man, thanks." Gongye Xiaorong bowed solemnly to Bihan. Bihan nodded and then turned around expressionlessly to leave. Bihan glanced at the ruined battlefield and didn't have any intentions of setting up seal formation defense lines. He was not skilled in defense and he didn't need defense. "Find the position of Mu Xian Battalion," Bihan said coldly. Dozens of scouts disappeared into the air. He did not stay where he was but ordered Xin Battalion to advance. He sent out scouts along the way in search of Mu Xian's position. Soon, the scouts found Mu Xian. Mu Xian Battalion was advancing murderously. After recovering their Shen power, how could Mu Xian Battalion accept their defeat? However, Mu Xian had a deep impression from last time. She reflected deeply and had learned her lesson. No top battle general was easy to deal with. Even if the enemy did not have the same manpower, she should never assume the other did not have the ability to retaliate. Mu Xian became more wary after she was bitten by Gongye Xiaorong when she had the advantage of manpower. While she had returned this time, she was not careless. Large numbers of scouts were sent out. Soon, the scouts of both sides met in skirmishes. Mu Xian quickly learned that there was an unknown battalion that was moving in her direction. She became even more wary. Someone that knew her strength and still dared to come over was not a normal person. She became even more wary but did not retreat. Soon, she saw the enemy battalion. Mu Xian's expression became grave. Bihan Xin Battalion. They came so quickly. What do they want to do? Yoshiyaka looked dazedly at the battalions that were gathering in front of the formation and murmured. The battalions flowed and gathered. The troops were coming constantly as though it was endless. Everyone, including Yoshiyaka, was stunned by the scene. In a short period of time, over 60,000 people had gathered in front of them. What kind of joke was this? Any average battalion here was just 2,000 to 3,000 people. 60,000 people, that meant the enemy had gathered about 30 battalions here. Yoshiyaka's eyes were experienced. From the presence that these 60,000 exuded, they were not normal battalions. They were well trained, they may be lacking compared to his Yoshi battalion but at least comparable to the battalions of his subordinates. Even more importantly, numbers. The defense line that Yoshiyaka was stationed at was only 20,000 people. Yoshi battalion was only 5,000 strong. The other 15,000 were from various elite battalions. Suddenly, Yoshiyaka shook and called over his second in command. He howled, "Go ask what the situation at the other places are like?" Yoshiyaka released his hand. The second in command scrambled to contact the other battalions. Yoshiyaka looked dazedly at the terrifying group of battalions with a dark expression. He murmured, "We cannot be this unlucky, is my place the breakpoint? If that was the case, then it would be terrible." Soon, the second in command rushed back and reported with an ashen face of the situations of the other battalions. Yoshiyaka was stunned. There was an astounding number of enemies gathered at each battalion's base, all of them elite forces. When he calculated the number, he suddenly shook. His face turned ashen. The enemy had put more than 300,000 elite troops into the first wave of attacks. It was so terrifying. No one knew about their own situation better than Yoshiyaka. 100 Savage Realm had fought endlessly for years, and the expenditure of their battalions had been astounding. While they said they had gathered 300,000, about 100,000 of this were just normal battalions. Battalions were not judged just by numbers, their training and skill level was even more important. Usually, battalions were divided into 3 ranks. The strongest top battalions were all led by the famed battle generals. The difference in numbers between these top battalions was great large. For example, Bi Hansin Battalion was always around 3,000 people, while at the other end Mu Xian Battalion was 10,000. However, at that level, what was important was the collective fighting power, and not numbers. The second rank was the elite battalions. On average, these battalions were weaker than top battalions, but were stronger than normal battalions. It could be said that the elite battalions relied on numbers. The numbers determined the difference in power between opponents. Elite battalions usually did not vary greatly in their skill. They fought based on numbers. The third rank was the normal battalions. They were usually the local garrisons, and acted as reserves for elite battalions. 100 Savage Realm had fought among itself for 10 years, while Nether Realm had rested for 10 years. The difference was completely on display now. Yoshi-Yaku's heart continued to sink. His battalion was the strongest of the Emotion Temple next to Chief Mo God. The Emotion Temple had 2 top battalions. The Chief Mo God lead one, Yoshi-Yaku lead the other, but the difference the number of elite battalions was too high. Top battalions were trump cards. They either decided the battle or they were used as intimidation. Elite battalions were the main forces in war and were usually the battalions that were exhausted the fastest. In the 10 years of internal conflict, 100 Savage Realm's elite battalions suffered significant losses. This didn't just lower the number of elite battalions, it also decreased the skill level of the elite battalions. Cultivation needed time. The training of an acceptable elite soldier took time. The enemy knew their weakness and used the simplest and most direct method, a strong attack. And an attack on all fronts. Fighting with more than 300,000 people. Yoshi-Yaku's mouth tasted bitter. He could see the problem, but he didn't have a solution. The battalion's shadows stretched out like a forest. Each face flashed with heated fighting spirit. There was only one person in their field of view, the unparalleled king wearing the bronze mask. This battalion was over 50,000 people. They were led by 10 gold battle generals, each of which was a lord of a region or the leader of a clan. They had been through hundreds of battles, were experienced and reliable. They were shrouded in killing intent and were authoritative. There was glory in having King personally leading them. The 10 gold battle generals were extremely excited. When they learned that their battalions had been picked to be led by King personally, everyone knew how rare a chance this was, and they decided they would fight to the death. These 50,000 were the elite of the elite. Each person would be the absolute strongest of an area. Also, each of them had at least 10 years of experience in a battalion. This meant that no matter if it was individual power or combat training, they were some of the best. The entire place was silent and filled with killing intent. These 50,000 would be led by Zuo Mo. This was the first time Zuo Mo was leading such a large battalion. His gaze was as usual as he swept across the battalion. His mind was unaffected. King, they are in their position. The second in command next to Zuo Mo reported loudly. Everyone heard this and their fighting spirits rose. And Mo and Liang Wei were both participating in this battle. Due to this, they arranged a second in command to communicate with the battalions for Zuo Mo. It was about to start. This battle was crucial for Zuo Mo. It is not just important for Zuo Mo's empire, it would also greatly change the structure of the world. Strangely, Zuo Mo's heart was calm. It was not affected at all by the great battle about to start. Without realizing it, he had reached a position of power that he didn't even dare to think about in the past. But Zuo Mo, who was maturing by the day, became even more composed. Attack! Zuo Mo's icy order was like a spark that immediately ignited this unprecedented campaign. A defense line of 5 jia, an army of 350,000 attacking simultaneously. The defense line exploded. The scene of an army of 350,000 attacking at once was almost unimaginable. The Shin power of 350,000 gathered on the 35,000 Imo captains, then to the 7,000 Imo colonels, and then to the 700 silver battle generals. The Shen techniques with their astounding power covered the entire defense line. The Shin technique each silver battle general released was different. Some sprayed fatal nether mist that immediately covered a range of 100 li, others were bright, grand, and came like a storm that robbed life, some were silent and caused immediate death. What was even more stunning was the attacks of gold battle generals. The Shin power that could destroy the land allowed them to release the strongest of Shin techniques. Their powerful control allowed them to easily control the pace of the battle. Boom boom boom. Grey blade energies hundreds of Zhonglong with long tails trailing behind as they smashed on the light shield of the defense line. The light shield made from Jinji wavered violently. Before they recovered, the grey mists dozens of Zhang Tall turned into skulls, packed rains of candles, and white screaming fist energies and other things that smashed against the light barrier. The light shield was like a fragile bubble that immediately shattered. No one had experienced such a terrifying attack, a barrage of such intensity. The Shen power of 350,000 was furiously sent into the battlefield as though it didn't cost anything in a spectacular display. The impenetrable 5Jia defense line wavered under the fires of battle. Zuo Mo knew it was time for him to attack. He unhooked the king's horn from his waist. Translator ramblings, Lil Cliffy wants to show up again before it disappears forever. If you find any errors, ads pop-up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 899, Horn. God Level. Chapter 899, Horn. God Level. His fingers held the king's horn. Shen power was channeled in, the densely packed bloody Shen glyphs on the king's horn lit up rapidly. A vast and authoritative presence spread outwards with Zuo Mo at the center. The 10 gold battle generals at the front jumped. Their expressions almost froze on their faces. This was. The king's horn moved towards his face, and sounded with an exhale. Whoa! The ancient horn sounded on the battlefield. The flashes of lights and the ear-deafening explosions could not suppress this long horn that rose out of the dust of time. Everyone on the battlefield stopped. They seemed to hear something in their body explode. A profound and cryptic glyph lit up in their blood. The power that was hiding in their bloodline seemed to be awoken by the horn. Submit. Instinctive submission. The invisible presence covered everyone on the battlefield. All the MO on the battlefield instinctively submitted. Their bodies were out of their control. Their spirits were stunned. The same horn, but the effects on the two sides were different. This strange power that rose from their bloodline would intimidate the spirits and restrain them if they had the thought to resist. It was unspeakably uncomfortable. Yet those subordinates under Zuo Mo's command felt as though a fire had been lit in their bodies. They were filled with endless power, they did not fear any battle. All hail the king! It was the first time Zuo Mo blew the king's horn without restraint. Just now, he finally understood what was inside this legendary article of the king. Crafted inside the king's horn was the first Mo king's comprehension about the Mo's bloodline power. The king's horn stimulated the deepest and most basic power of the Mo bloodlines. It was a terrifying power. Zuo Mo felt a wave of respect. Their Mo bloodline power had no secrets in the eyes of that first Mo king. Zuo Mo quickly refocused. He noticed the flames that lit up in the eyes of his commanders. Kill. The icy order sounded in every corner of the battlefield. Zuo Mo appeared at the front of the battle formation. The defense line at Skyward Jia wavered under the strong attacks. The battalions of 50,000 attacked furiously without regard for Shen power. Almost all the seal formations in Jinji collapsed in a short amount of time. Gongzishi hadn't thought that they would encounter such a fierce attack. The army of 50,000 people seemed to cover the sky. These attacks filled with the energy of death were gray, black, white and green as they rained down. It was the first time that Gongzishi encountered such a ferocious attack that he even had a short moment of dazedness. When he recovered, he immediately noticed the subordinates surrounding him were unconsciously resisting. Gongzishi immediately recognized the problem. The pace of battle was being dictated by the enemy. His side was fighting back out of instinct and lacked organization. Reactively responding like this was meaningless. Gongzishi was about to shout to stop them when a low horn suddenly sounded over the battlefield. Gongzishi seemed to be struck by lightning. The energies in his bodies roiled and he was astounded. His expression changed dramatically. He was a top battle general. Having transformed from a noble young master into a top battle general, his heart was not as fragile as it had once been. He immediately turned to look at his subordinates, and his heart sank. Everywhere he saw, his commanders were dazed, all soulless. A legend suddenly appeared in his mind. King's Horn. That was the King's Horn. He suddenly turned and looked towards the enemy battalions. At this time, he saw the enemy battle formation split open from the middle. The battle formation that had been fighting against them parted to the sides and a battalion showed themselves through the split. At the very front of the battalion was a Mo wearing a copper mask that looked coldly at him. Kill. Instantly, Gongzishi's heart almost stopped beating. But after a short daze, he recovered. And then Gongzishi paled. So fast. The enemy had almost reached them. Defend! Defend! Gongzi Shi shouted. His handsome face did not have any of his nobility and dignity. He only hoped now that his shout would get his sai to focus. What reassured Gongzi Shi slightly was that this battalion he had spent so much effort to build had not completely collapsed under the pressure. They gathered their remaining morale and started to muster a defense. The enemies in his field of view released light. The violent Shin power vibrations caused Gongzi Shi to feel as though it was a Shin power wave heading towards him. The 10 gold battle generals flashed with light that was as thick as fire. But what was the most blinding was Zuo Mo at the front. Surging Shin power that filled the space around him. The Shin power that contained terrifying power slowly flowed around him. The space around him twisted. People could not see his figure clearly, only the surging Shin power and a figure like that of a Mo god. A dot of light flew out of that figure. Gongzi Shi's pupils suddenly widened. Not good. Yet that dot of white light immediately flew in front of him. At this time, the dot of light had turned into a patch of blinding white light. As though the sun was thrown at him. They did not have the time to struggle before they were swallowed by the blinding white light that had expanded rapidly. The most crucial 300 li of the entire Sky Jia defense line was consumed by the burning white light. The burning white light silently consumed everything. Only a breath after the expansion of light did a tsunami of sound swept outwards. The terrifying flows of energy made even the Nether Realm battalions feel as though they were in a storm. Everyone was stunned dumb by this attack, even if this attack had been released from their side. Before this, no one could draw on the Shin power of 50,000 elite, so no one knew what it would be like when the Shin power of 50,000 were gathered together into one attack. Now, they knew. 10 breaths later, the light finally faded. What appeared in front of them was an enormous chasm that was 300 li wide, an enormous crack that stretched beyond the horizon. The deep chasm was 30 zhang wide and the surrounding walls were as smooth as glass. There was nothing in the deep hole. The crack was over 10 li long and seemed bottomless. The shape cut into the ground in a perfectly rounded edge. If they could see into the ground, they would find that the structure of this jia had been completely changed. No one could muster up the bravery to stand against such an attack. The strongest battle general and the strongest battalion of the Mo Marshals Alliance had turned to dust. The remaining Mo Marshals Alliance forces lost the bravery to fight. Even Zuo Mo hadn't expected that the Shin power of 50,000 was so terrifying when gathered together. When the amount of Shin power reached a certain level, it would cause a tangible change. The Shin power of 50,000 gathered together was not the same as 20,000 or 30,000. Even he had almost lost control. That attack had been risky. He wouldn't dare to do it again. However, what comforted Zuo Mo was that this attack had laid the foundation for the victory over 100 Savage Realm. No one will be able to stop the steps of their advance. Victory was unstoppable. Shui Dong's battalion stealthily appeared at the borders of the 4 minor Diana sects. Soon, the traces of Shui Dong battalion were found. Shui Dong did not fear this. He quickly defeated a few battalions of the 4 minor Diana sects. Yet he quickly realized something was not right. Yang Yuanhao was not at the 4 minor Diana sects. Shui Dong was startled. Yang Yuanhao was not at the 4 minor Diana sects, then where was he? Shui Dong had not lingered. He had traveled day and night to the 4 minor Diana sects. Shui Dong had wanted to ambush Yang Yuanhao. One-on-one, Shui Dong had enough confidence to win. Mo Cloud C had the advantage in the number of generals, and this was not good for Kunlun. Even though Kunlun had developed some good young battle generals in the past few years, but there was still a big difference between these young people and the present top battle generals. Gongye Xiaorong and Mu Shuang's battalions would only recover after recuperating for a while. In other words, Mo Cloud C's active troops, other than Gongsun Cha and Bihan, were Yang Yuanhao and Guliang Dao. The plan was first defeat Yang Yuanhao and Guliang Dao to create good conditions for the final battle with Mo Cloud C. Shui Dong had headed for Yang Yuanhao, while Lin Qian had gone alone to deal with Guliang Dao. If Wei Sheng and the others had not returned, Lin Qian's target would have been Gongsun Chao. However, Wei Sheng and the others did return. Lin Qian was still extremely wary of Wei Sheng. Kunlun had the advantage of strength and there was no need to take such a risk. Guliang Dao only had a Xuanyu with him, and he was only pseudo-god level. Alone he was not a threat to Lin Qian. First grind away the claws and teeth, then fight. That was Kunlun's strategy. However, when Shui Dong found that Yang Yuanhao was not at the 4 minor Diana sects, his expression changed. This meant that Yang Yuanhao had left the 4 minor Diana sects early. Even the higher-ups of the 4 minor Diana sects were not present. The signs all indicated that when Kunlun had attacked North Tianhuan, Mo Cloud C had started their actions against Kunlun. Shui Dong was not an ordinary person. Almost instantly, he guessed Yang Yuanhao's goal. Kunlun. However, after guessing the other's intentions, Shui Dong was not too nervous. If Yang Yuanhao thought that Kunlun's rear was empty, that would be a great mistake. The higher-ups of the four minor dhyana sects were not here. There was no meaning in sweeping away the four minor dhyana sects. At this time was most precious. Shui Dong did not hesitate and left the four minor dhyana sects. Before leaving, he ordered the 5 great dhyana sects that had sided with Kunlun to attack the 4 minor dhyana sects. Cannon fodder should be dealt with by cannon fodder. A place of this significance was not worthy of his battalion's efforts time. At this time, he received a message from Mu Xian. Mu Xian battalion encountered Bihan Xin battalion. Shui Dong's eyes lit up. He was not far from Mu Xian battalion. As long as Mu Xian battalion delayed Bihan for a few days, he would arrive. At that time, he could complete a pincer strategy with Mu Xian battalion against Bihan. Even if Bihan had wings, he would not be able to fly away. He hadn't thought of this. Yang Yuanhao had left, and Bihan came. Shui Dong immediately realized that this was a perfect opportunity to eliminate Bihan Xin battalion. Translator ramblings, there goes the nuclear bomb. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 900, Fight to the Death. Chapter 900, Fight to the Death. Minan's face was black. He received Shui Dong's orders asking him to immediately move closer to Mu Xian to surround Bihan. If they could destroy Xin battalion, it would be a heavy blow to Mo Cloud C. Both Yang Yuanhao and Gu Liangdao were top battle generals, but in the eyes of Kunlun, their threat level, and the threat levels of Gongsun Sha and Bihan were not at the same level. This difference was like the difference between Minan and Shui Dong. However, Minan was unable to leave being tied down by Mu Shuang. A few days ago, he had crippled Mu Shuang battalion. Only slightly more than 1,000 people were left. But this 1,000 with the support of a few normal battalions were forcing Minan to stay. The cruelty and harshness of the battle surpassed Minan's imagination. The others' defense line was in shambles, but they were steadfast. Minan's side would bombard them, but once they stopped, the enemy would rush out of somewhere, leapt at them, and drag them down to die. Even Mu Xuan was fighting at the front lines. The normal battalions they usually dismissed were fearless. Everyone was familiar with each other. Minan's battalion and Mu Shuang's battalion knew each other well. Some were even relatives. Minan was also familiar with Mu Shuang. He knew that the old person on the other side had the desire to die with his enemies. Tianhuan had already died. Minan knew that this was troublesome. Mu Xuan was a just person but was deeply respected in Tianhuan. If he decided to sacrifice himself, countless people would follow him to leap like moths to a flame. As expected, Minan battalion was scared by the enemy's furiousness and fearlessness. Their morale was low. Mu Shuang's side did not have the strength, but they had the will to die, so they did not fear death. Minan battalion actually started to decline back when Minan split up Tianhuan. For a battalion, if they did not have strong core beliefs, they could never become a top battalion. Usually, it couldn't be seen, but once it came to a battle like this when they needed to put their lives on the line, it would be exposed. When he saw the fear in the eyes of the commanders, Minan's heart turned cold. If Minan did not usually keep strong control on the discipline of the battalion, this battalion would have collapsed already. A hint of confusion flashed through Minan's eyes. Sometimes, he would wonder if he was correct in what he did. But soon, his gaze cleared up. He took a deep breath. He was also pushed to the precipice as well. If he lost this battle, he would lose everything. All the power and glory would be far from his reach. Minan's gaze flashed with vicious light. He had no choice. You wanted to fight to the death. Mu Xuan, I will satisfy you. Mu Xian was in a terrible state. She hadn't expected that she would encounter Bihan. She had suffered a small loss against Gongye Xiaorong. That had been due to carelessness. Carelessness should not occur in a battle general of her level, but fortunately, the loss had not been large. But when she encountered Bihan Xin battalion, the pressure on Mu Shuang suddenly increased. From a long time ago, Bihan had entered the ranks of top battle generals, but his ranking had always been low. People's evaluation of Bihan was never high. Offensively strong and weak defensively, skilled in charges, weak in strategy, however, Bihan Xin battalion was still one of the few undefeated battalions of the world. Gongsun Sha's Vermilion Bird Camp and Bihan Xin battalion had never lost a fight. The two were both top battle generals, but what they had experienced was completely different. Lil Miss Gongsun had been of low birth, but he had what could be considered a smooth path on this road of becoming a battle general. Even as he became a top battle general, almost everyone's evaluations of Gongsun Cha were strangely similar. This was a great battle general, he had powerful strength, astounding strategic vision, and even more terrifyingly, he had no clear weaknesses. Bihan had once been thought of a young genius on the same level as Jiangzhe, but then was buried for many years. He betrayed Xian Kong Temple, returned to 100 Savage Realm, yet what he encountered was disdain and mockery. He couldn't even get the Jinji on his body removed. No one was willing to help him. These people were probably full of regret now. There had once been a great battle general in front of them. Fortunately, he encountered Zuo Mo, and had started to show his great power. But he was still not comparable to Gongsun Cha's light. Bihan only changed people's impressions of him at the Battle of the Mo Marshals Alliance. While the battle had increased people's opinion of him, Xin Battalion had been heavily injured. People once again had a negative outlook on Bihan. An unique genius that endured great hardship was probably the best description of Bihan. However, Bihan still became a famous battle general. Even someone like Mu Xian felt anxious facing him. Having just suffered a loss, Mu Xian Battalion had reduced power and their morale was low. Mu Xian would not care about these things when she was facing other enemies, but this was a terrible matter when she faced Bihan's Xin Battalion. When taking over Xixian, Bihan had defeated all the factions with the remnants of Xin Battalion until they didn't know which way was north. And right now, complete. They were complete. Xin Battalion had a way of getting reinforcements. Mu Xian's eyes narrowed and swept across Xin Battalion. She did not find any new member of Xin Battalion. They didn't look any different than before. Bihan did not intend to waste words, and immediately set up an offensive formation. Mu Xian's gaze turned cold, and flush rose on her face. She was wary of Bihan but didn't fear him. Any top battle general would never lack confidence and the trust that they would win. Otherwise, they would not have gotten to where they were. Her eyes flashing with cold light, Mu Xian shouted, "Teams, coiling wind sword formation, ut." Before she finished speaking, the formation changed. The troops had been in organized ranks before, but now they were like strands of swaying sea grass. Each sea grass was giving off faint light. They gathered their Shin power and waited for the incoming attacks. Bihan looked expressionlessly at the formation in front of him that was filled with killing intent. It was not unexpected to him that Mu Xian had used a battle formation designed to grapple. She was famed for her detailed tactics. Sword formations had many variations and could change quickly. No matter what style the opponent used, they could quickly find a method to subdue them. While his expression was still cold, there seemed to be a ball of fire burning inside Bihan. His blood boiled at being able to fight against a powerful opponent. The arsonist seemed to feel his fighting spirit. It flowed with light as though fire was streaming by. Arsonist had been constantly modified and improved by Gold Crow Camp in these 10 years. It was slightly different from when Zuo Mo had forged it. Not just arsonist, even Xin Battalion that surrounded him was filled with fighting spirit. They were connected mentally with Bihan. Bihan felt as though he was in a sea of fire. It was the first time he had encountered this. Come! Xin Battalion attack! Skywood Jia being lost announced the defeat of the 5 Jia defense line. There was no meaning in holding the 5 Jia defense line. The soulless Emotion Temple and Heroes Alliance retreated in panic almost overnight. The morale of Nether Realm rose. All hail the king! Unite the Mo! People finally started to dream of the day that the Mo would be united. After defeating the 5 Jia defense line, all of 100 Savage Realm appeared in front of the Nether King's great army. Zuo Mo did not hesitate and allowed the army to move in. The factions along the way surrendered as they arrived. One reason was because the Nether Realm army was truly powerful, and the other was one that Zuo Mo didn't know whether to laugh or cry about: the King's Horn. The King's Horn was something from the legends, and these legends all resurfaced now. All the rumors said that the Nether King was likely to be the king to next unite the Mo. It came to the point that whenever they came to a place, an Mo and the others would ask Zuo Mo to blow the King's Horn. With Zuo Mo Shin power, when the King's Horn was blown, the entire Jia would hear it. Zuo Mo gaped at the effectiveness of this move. If he blew the King's Horn on the first day, then on the second waves of faction leaders would come in to willingly surrender. There was nothing more effective than this move. Zuo Mo used this method to quickly take over the territory of the Mo Marshals Alliance. He had the upper hand, and taking over the territory meant that he was connected to Mo Cloud Sea. This allowed Zuo Mo to sigh in relief. What was left was only the Heroes Alliance and the Emotion Temple. The Heroes' Alliance was not strong and they were only a loose organization. Zuo Mo placed no importance on it. The one that could be an obstacle to the army was the Emotion Temple. The Emotion Temple wasn't just the largest and the strongest faction, the rule of the Emotion Temple was strong. Zuo Mo's advance speed was not fast. While he was in a hurry, he did not want any accidents to happen at the rear. Only after taking over all of the Mo Marshals Alliance's territory did Zuo Mo decided to speed up. At this time, Liang Wei sent a message back. An Mo was reliable and had the authority, so he was left with Zuo Mo. If he was in charge, it would save great trouble for Zuo Mo. Liang Wei was sensitive and reactive, clever and suitable for being leading the attack. As expected, Liang Wei's results were outstanding. Other than leading the King's Horn, he also led 100,000 troops. They were extremely ferocious and headed directly for Heroes' Alliance. At this time, Heroes' Alliance had not given up and appeared as though they wanted to fight to the death. Yet Liang Wei executed a feint maneuver. He left the army camp secretly and led the King's Horn to move through the night to suddenly appear at the flanks of the enemy's defense line. A perfect Liang Wei-style ambush. The Heroes' Alliance was alarmed and panicked. They moved their battalions to surround the King's Horn. The astounding capabilities of the King's Horn were on display in this battle. They fought and moved. They were at ease in front of battalions that outnumbered them by dozens of times. They defeated 7 large battalions in succession. Liang Wei pulling around caused the defense line of the Heroes' Alliance to weaken. The 100,000 army that had been waiting immediately attacked on all fronts. The Heroes' Alliance defense line immediately crumbled. Afterwards, Liang Wei seemed to suddenly appear out of the mist heading for the core army of the Heroes' Alliance. The King's Horn seemed to be untouchable. Liang Wei captured all the higher-ranking members of the Heroes' Alliance. 3 days later, the Heroes' Alliance surrendered. The battle made Liang Wei famous. Translator ramblings, the split viewpoints are annoying to read even though I know how the story goes. Just have to get everything on several different fronts wrapped up. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 901, How have you been? Chapter 901, How have you been? Yu Qinlai stood respectfully. After being in power for 10 years, Ming Yuyi seemed to be a different person. She was still beautiful, but there was authority at her brow, and that pair of spirited eyes had become as deep as the ocean. No one cared about her age any longer. Everyone was fearful in front of her and didn't dare to breathe. Over the last 10 years, Ming Yuyi had successfully eliminated her political enemies. There was only one voice in the Yao. The Council of Elders had no power. All of the important departments and elite battalions were in her control. After reading the reports, Ming Yuyi's brow furrowed. Liang Wei? She had a reminiscing expression. This name clearly stirred many of her memories. Liang Wei of the Ice Frost Corps? She had some recollection about this name. He was a silver battle general that had accomplished a great victory in the war against Kunlun. Then he had been relieved of his duties and sent home. This had been an example of corruption. She had used to attack the Council of Elders and it had created some big waves. Yes. Yu Qinlai said cleanly but certainly. How did he get to Nether Realm? Don't know. Yu Qinlai said calmly, should this be investigated? There was no flaw to be seen on his face. While he had buried the matter that he had interacted with Liang Wei in the past, he had not relaxed. As he hid in the shadows for long and longer, he became even more careful. He would not leave behind this one opening. Therefore, Yu Qinlai promoted all the subordinates that had participated in that meeting, and gave them more power. In this past decade, the biggest mission carried out was the cleanse. Yu Qinlai was the sharpest blade in Ming Yuyi's hands, and his subordinates naturally had to participate in these missions. Promotion meant that they needed to take harder and riskier missions. Therefore, these people slowly decreased in number. Liang Wei had been politically silent for 10 years, and these people had forgotten him long ago. These people would never have thought that the matter of Liang Wei was the cause of their deaths. Because they had died for the public good, their families were taken care of. They could enter the best Yao art houses, and they could get steady jobs. Violent times was the best concealment. No one noticed the systematic sacrifice of these people. Even these people did not detect it. Too many people had been sacrificed in these 10 years. Even Yu Qinlai had been heavily wounded multiple times and almost died a few times. Yu Qinlai rejoiced at his past cautiousness. If any of the people were still alive, he would be in trouble. If his past subordinates were still here, and Liang Wei suddenly appeared under the command of the Nether King, everyone would find it strange. Ming Yuyi did not respond and sighed in regret, I misjudged. In the past, I thought that he was just an average silver battle general not worthy of recruitment. I hadn't thought that his talent would rival me Su. I missed recruiting such a famed general. It is a great mistake. Also, as a Yao, he leads an MO battalion. It seems that us Yao will also have a battle general like Bihan. Ming Yuyi was filled with regret. Based on Liang Wei's status in the past, she only needed to show some attention, and he would be faithful. 1,000 soldiers was easy to obtain, one general was hard to find, especially a general like this. In this battle, Liang Wei formally made it into the ranks of top battle generals. Shaking her head, Ming Yuyi threw away her vexation. How is the fighting between Kunlun and Mo Cloud Sea? The two have started an all-out war. Yu Qinlai paid extra attention to Mo Cloud Sea and knew it well. From the intelligence reports we have received, the two sides have not prepared for the final battle. Mo Cloud Sea's intentions at the beginning was to use North Tianhuan as a lure to attract Kunlun so they could ambush from the back and expend Kunlun's military power. Kunlun wanted to first take Tianhuan and get rid of weaknesses as it strengthened their holdings and then use the four minor Diana sects or Guliang Dao as a target to initiate the final fight with Mo Cloud Sea. Ming Yuyi nodded. Li Xian'er's move was beautiful. Mo Cloud Sea had to accept her proposal, and Kunlun had to fight. She showed a smile. The two titans will fight for a long time. We need to take this chance to rest and recover. When both sides are wounded, it will be the time for my Yao to rise. The Yao who had just recovered slightly from the cleanse could not move. No one knew better than Ming Yuyi how much the Yao had exhausted themselves in the 10 years of internal conflict. In her view, the internal fighting in the Xiuzha and the Mo world was a blessing from the heavens for the Yao to recover. Darren is wise. Yu Qinlai said with an expression of agreement. Inside, he smirked coldly. He had gotten in contact with Pu. While Pu had not said it, he could hear from Pu's tone that Pu had other plans. Yu Qinlai was extremely smart, and he had worked in the intelligence field for many years. He was skilled in finding the truth from hints. Liang Wei had appeared in the command of the Nether King. Thinking about Pu's certainty, the return of Wei Sheng and the others to Mo Cloud Sea, and Zuo Mo's impeding return, he reached an absurd conclusion: the Nether King was possibly Zuo Mo. In reality, he frightened himself with his conclusion. But he quickly calmed down. If this was true, then Zuo Mo was unprecedentedly powerful. This was a nightmare to the other factions. In his view, the Emotion Temple could not withstand for long. The difference in power was too great. The Mo uniting could not be stopped. If his guess was true, once Zuo Mo defeated Emotion Temple, he would possess 100 Savage Realm, Nether Realm, and Mo Cloud Sea. He would become the strongest in the world. The only chance to resist would be for the Yao and Kunlun to ally together. But now, Ming Yuyi decided to wait until the two sides finished fighting. Yu Qinlai smirked inside. Once Zuo Mo finished uniting the Mo, he would be stronger than Kunlun. More importantly, Kunlun would never imagine that the Nether King was the king of Mo Cloud Sea. With Zuo Mo's plans, Kunlun would suffer a great loss. Yu Qinlai understood Pu well. With Pu's style, he might not move, but if he did, it would be a fatal blow. He would not give Kunlun a chance to come back. At that time, would the Yao be a match for Zuo Mo? No one had expected that after all the fighting, the most outstanding general under the Nether King's command was not an Mo but Liang Wei. In the past, everyone thought that the Nether King's weakness was that he had the soldiers but lacked capable generals. This lack of generals referred to the top-ranked battle generals. 100 Savage Realm had always been fighting, and the battalions had been reduced, but they had a group of top battle generals. Emotion Temple, the Mo Marshals Alliance and Heroes Alliance all had top battle generals. While they were much weaker than the Xiuzha Alliance, they were much stronger than the Nether Realm. Nether Realm had been relatively peaceful, especially after the Nether Realm had been united. There had been no more fighting. Without the experience of battle, it was difficult for top battle generals to mature, even for large sects like Kunlun with their outstanding battle general training systems and enormous number of battle generals. A true top battle general would only come out of battle. Now, Nether King's shortcoming was made up. Other than Liang Wei's appearance out of nowhere, there was now Qi Xing, formerly of the Heroes Alliance. Qi Xing was a large reason why the Heroes Alliance was able to survive while being squeezed between the Emotion Temple and the Mo Marshals Alliance. He was the most outstanding battle general of the Heroes Alliance and the only top battle general the Heroes Alliance had. But Qi Xing had terrible luck. Liang Wei cleverly avoided his position and pushed into the core of Heroes Alliance. He had immediately recognized the situation and hurried back to save the higher-ups, but he was a step late. All of the Heroes Alliance higher-ups had surrendered. He didn't even have the time to fight back, he could only surrender. Qi Xing was much weaker as a warrior compared to an Mo. This could be seen from the scale of the two battalions. With Qi Xing's strength, he could only lead 6,000 elites. But an Mo could easily lead 10,000 without a problem. While in terms of strategic ability and perception, an Mo was lacking. Zuo Mo selected the elite of each battalion for Qi Xing to assemble a troop from. In Zuo Mo's view, top-tier battle generals need top-tier battalions. Qi Xing wasn't bad, but his original battalion wasn't great. What Zuo Mo had the most of right now were battalions. Liang Wei had accomplished a great victory in capturing all the higher-ups of Heroes Alliance. The collective surrender of Heroes Alliance mean the number of battalions under Zuo Mo swelled again. So many battalions. There definitely were enough to create a top battalions for Qi Xing. He did not worry about Qi Xing. He believed that Qi Xing was not so dumb. Right now, he had the two spears, Liang Wei and Qi Xing. He also had an Mo in charge, the experienced and reliable general. There almost wasn't anything for him to do. On the other side, all the Jias under the rule of the Mo Sheng Temple moved. The development of the war robbed people of hope. The advancement of the Nether King's army was almost unimaginably fast. Once Heroes Alliance had surrendered, it left Mo Sheng Temple to fight alone. They had no place to retreat. The Mo Sheng Temple had expanded greatly in the past years, and had conquered almost half of Hundred Savage Realm. It was still the largest faction of Hundred Savage Realm. Of the 5 Mo gods, there were top experts and top battle generals. However, they were lacking compared to the Nether King. Especially after the god-level Nether King's attack on Skywood Jia shook the world. People had seen the strength of a god level through the battle at Nether King River. However, experiencing it in person was completely different. An Mo was the main commander, Liang Wei and Qi Xing were the second-in-commands. A three-pronged attack formed. An Mo was not the strongest, but he was reliable and he had the respect of the troops. Zuo Mo did not worry with him in charge of the army. Nothing more needed to be said of Liang Wei. He was the rising star of the moment. Zuo Mo also put great hopes on Qi Xing. He wanted to see Qi Xing's abilities. Zuo Mo was organizing the territories of Hundred Savage Realm they had conquered. He needed to first set up the political structure before he would be able to attack the Mo Sheng Temple without any worries. Once they swept the Mo Sheng Temple away, it was time for them to turn and pincer Kunlun. By that time, there would be no time to deal with all of this. The battle against Kunlun might continue for a long time. At that time, a steady rear was important. Also, managing Hundred Savage Realm was not suitable for the Mo of Nether Realm to do. He needed the Mo of Hundred Savage Realm. Only then would he stabilize Hundred Savage Realm as quickly as possible. Zuo Mo had met the higher-ups of Heroes Alliance, but he didn't have a good feeling about them. Those people were too average in ability and would not able to fulfill their duties to his satisfaction. Others thought that Zuo Mo had no one to use, but didn't know that Zuo Mo had selected candidates a long time ago. He thought back to the time at Great Peace City with a reminiscing expression on his face. Princess Xia. The Lan brothers, I wonder how have you been? Translator ramblings, so all that set up in the Great Peace City arc is for this throwaway sentence. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 902, The Final Battle of the Strongest and God Level. Chapter 902, The Final Battle of the Strongest and God Level. Shuedong Battalion was ordered to a sudden stop. There was a battalion waiting silently ahead of them. Shuedong's pupils suddenly contracted. Vermilion Bird Camp. After hearing of Beihan and Xin Battalion's actions, Shuedong was not too surprised. It was confirmed the 4 minor Diana sects in Mo Cloud Sea had been in cahoots for a long time. His position had been exposed. How could Lil Miss, with his abilities, not guess his target? A hint of smile suddenly appeared on the corner of Shuedong's lips. Fighting spirit burned in his eyes. He had been anticipating this battle for a long time. Gongsun Lil Miss. Vermilion Bird Camp. An undefeated battle general. An undefeated battalion. Only a person like this qualified to be his opponent. In Shuedong's eyes, Gongsun Sha was the only one that could be his opponent. He never thought of Bihan or people like Yang Yuan Hao and Guliang Dao as his equals. There was only one person that could be discussed together with him, Gongsun Sha. The strongest battle general of Mo Cloud Sea, Lil Miss that smiled beautifully as he caused the world to feel terror. Shuedong had studied Gongsun Sha before. The more he studied him, the more admiration he felt. Shuedong thought that he had reached the epitome of what it was to be a battle general. While he had not reached the state that he would be undefeatable, There had never been a battalion that actually made him feel threatened. Even Gu Liang Dao, the tiger of Shixian, had been crippled by him. If Gongsun Sha had not come with help in time, Gu Liang Dao wouldn't even have the chance to flee. Shui Dong's opinion of Gongsun Sha was extremely high. Gongsun Sha was like him, they didn't have clear weaknesses. Just like him, Gongsun Sha was skilled in grabbing people's weaknesses. Just like him, Gongsun Sha could change his style as he willed. The only thing different was the style of fighting. Shui Dong's style was domineering and brutal like a crushing hammer. Gongsun Sha's style was sharp and flexible like a razor-sharp blade that stripped flesh from bone with each strike. In terms of training new talents, Shui Dong thought that he was far behind Gongsun Sha. Gongsun Sha trained one batch after another of first-class battle generals. These battle generals were the core of Mo Cloud C's strength. Internally, even Kunlun thought that the skill level of Kunlun's battle generals were not as good as Mo Cloud C. In these last 10 years, other than fighting, Shui Dong invested almost all of his extra time into training new people. Once he thought of Gongsun Sha as his rival, the competitive Shui Dong could not allow himself to fall behind Gongsun Sha in any field. The appearance of new talented generals in Kunlun these past years were in part due to Shui Dong's efforts. However, Shui Dong still felt they could not compare to Mo Cloud C's Ma Fan and the others. This displeased him. He always anticipated having a true battle with Gongsun Sha. He hadn't thought that the chance to arrange the battle would come so soon. Shui Dong stepped out. Almost as though they had a pre-arranged agreement, Gongsun Sha also came to the front of his troops. He saw the bashful Gongsun Sha. Even though Shui Dong had seen Gongsun Sha in the mirages before, he still stilled. This guy opposite him was like a neighbor's boy filled with sunshine and warmth. There was no killing energy at all. Shui Dong couldn't connect him with that undefeatable battle general whose enemies fled at the sound of his name. This one is Shui Dong, greetings to Mr. Gongsun. Shui Dong bowed. Mr. Shui is too polite. Gongsun Sha's smile became even more bashful. Shui Dong would not be fooled by Gongsun Sha's smile, but he still felt a strange sense of conflict. He quickly focused and said loudly, I had originally thought that the battle between us will occur after Mr. Zuo returned. I hadn't expected to meet so soon. It seems the battle between you and I is fated. It's not fate. Gongsun Sha still had the smile, but his words were as sharp as knives. It's strategy. Shui Dong's heart shook, but his expression did not change. He smiled amusedly, strategy, I like the term. As long as Mr. Shui likes it. Gongsun Sha gave a harmless smile. If Mr. Shui likes it, I am even more confident. Ah, your Xixiang is a great genius, and Mr. Shui is also an invincible battle general, it would be a pity if either of you fall. Ha ha. Shui Dong roared with laughter. Who in the world is eldest Xixiang's match? Who is my match? The words were arrogant, but the confidence in the tone caused people to believe the words. Really? Gongsun Sha's smile was even more bashful. Does Mr. Shui think that God level is invincible? Does Mr. Shui think that there is only a Lin Qian in the world? Mr. Shui really underestimates the heroes of the world. Shui Dong's heart jumped and his eyes narrowed. However, he did not feel any fear. He laughed and said, a great battle is about to start, why play these little mind games? Let's fight. I've been waiting for this fight for a long time. Mr. Shui is right. The corners of Gongsun Sha's mouth curved up sharply like blades. The warm and bashful smile immediately filled with killing intent. Pity, war, it is not the same as before. Vermilion Bird camp against Shui Dong Battalion. The two strongest battle generals of the world, the two strongest battalions, fight. Wei Sheng was extremely fast. He was urgently flying at full speed. His target was Lin Qian. Gongsun Sha was right. War had changed. The appearance of God-level experts changed the state of war. In the past, no matter how strong the strongest was, they could not change the balance of war by themselves. This situation was transformed as God level appeared. It would not be difficult for a God level to take the head of the enemy leader among the tens of thousands of soldiers. A God level was strong enough they did not fear stepping deep into the enemy's territory. Take the general's head. This terrifying tactic could deeply change the state of war. Kunlun had also found the power of this tactic. According to their intelligence, Lin Qian had split up from Shui Dong a long time ago and his whereabouts were unknown. Lin Qian's goal was either Gu Liang Dao or Yang Yuan Hao. Neither Gu Liang Dao nor Yang Yuan Hao could stop Lin Qian. They didn't have God-level fighters under their command. Also, the loss of either Gu Liang Dao or Yang Yuan Hao and their battalions would be a great loss to Mo Cloud C's faction. Mo Cloud C had repeatedly discussed and studied. The conclusion they reached was that god levels were unsolvable at this time. This imbalance would only be temporary, lasting about 10 years at maximum. 10 years later, the skill level of the battalions would increase by 2 levels, and there would be more pseudo-god levels. 5 pseudo-god levels would be enough to stop a god level. But that time, war would enter a new equilibrium. God-level experts would not be undefeatable and the use of battle generals would once again be viable. Top battle generals like Gu Liangdao and Yang Yuanhao could not be trained during this time. In these 10 years, whoever possessed god-level experts, who possessed the most god-level experts would have the advantage. On the way, Wei Sheng had been wondering who Lin Xian's target was. Yang Yuanhao or Gu Liangdao? Thinking while traveling, Wei Sheng thought the probability of Gu Liangdao was higher. Gu Liangdao and Yang Yuanhao were about the same in strength, but among their factions, Gu Liangdao clearly had the higher status. Also, Gu Liangdao's relationship to Mo Cloud Sea was closer than Yang Yuanhao. The benefits to killing Gu Liangdao was greater than killing Yang Yuanhao. Also, Gu Liangdao had marched deeper into Kunlun territory. Gu Liangdao had been filled with the desire for revenge after being defeated by Xuedong. This meant that he had invaded faster than Yang Yuanhao had. This meant that it was easier for Lin Xian to find them. Lin Xian looked at Gu Liangdao battalion before him. In his eyes, those people were like ants. Xuang Yu was covered in wounds. His face was ashen. His right arm had been severed by Lin Xian, yet he had no intentions of stemming the bleeding. He looked upwards at the figure in the sky. Lin Xian stood holding his sword, the white robes fluttering in the wind. He was outside the reach of the mortal realm. Gu Liangdao's battalion was furiously attacking. The light of countless spells flew into the sky, yet Lin Xian did not budge. The light shield around him did not shudder at all. The rain of attacks didn't even cause a ripple on the surface. Surrender, Gu Liangdao, I feed no meaning in needless killing. Lin Xian's cool voice came from the sky. Gu Liangdao's spirits were extinguished. He looked at the sky. Was this a god-level expert? It was the first time he felt completely powerless. Even when he had lost to Xuedong last time, he had not been so discouraged. This kind of discouragement was not because of Lin Xian's strength but because he suddenly found that the battalion was not the strongest power in the world any longer. What would rule the world would be the god level. Big brother. A hoarse voice suddenly called out. Gu Liangdao turned around. It was Xuang Yu. His eyes suddenly showed a hint of warmth. As he looked at this brother that had followed him, he suddenly calmed down. Xuang Yu, do you regret it? Regret? Xuang Yu suddenly laughed. Big brother, why would you ask this? No one regrets this. God level is really strong. Gu Liangdao looked into the sky and lamented. Brother Zuo will avenge us. Xuang Yu had an expression of certainty. You are right. Gu Liangdao suddenly showed a smile and said with bravado, then let us find out today, just how strong a god-level expert is. Gu Liangdao motioned for the battalion to stop attacking. The sky full of lights disappeared. Everyone looked towards their commander. The cloud over Gu Liangdao was swept away. He raised his arm, his expression full of murderousness, his spirit brimming. He shouted, fight to the death. To the death. Everyone shouted. To the death. Gu Liangdao roared like a tiger, his hair standing on end. To the death. What answered him were the even stronger shouts from the battalion. To the death. Gu Liangdao shouted with all of his strength. Even his voice had become his hoarse, but each person could clearly feel his intent to die. To the death. To the death. To the death. The soul-shaking shouts caused their fighting spirit to consume them like fire. There was no terror, no retreat, only stepping towards their deaths. Kill. Gu Liangdao pointed his long blade into the sky. Kill. The one-armed Xuang Yu's Shin power burned furiously. His usually gentle features were twisted. He was like a ball of fire that charged with the will to die towards that figure in the sky, the one that seemed to be above the world. Kill. The battalion charged like an uncontrolled sea of fire towards Lin Xian in the sky. Lin Xian changed expression but sighed softly. The immemorial Shin sword shook and a sharp light suddenly formed. At the very front, Xuang Yu was immediately pieced by the light. Then this tiny light then cleaved through the raging Gu Liangdao battalion. A hole the size of a fist appeared in Gu Liangdao's chest. Lin Xian's blow penetrated through the entire battalion. Yet Gu Liangdao still wore a smile. Lin Xian's expression suddenly changed. Translator ramblings, I feel that Gongsun Cha is the most passive-aggressive character in this story. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 903, In the Name of Eldest Shixiong. Chapter 903, In the Name of Eldest Shixiong. The entire battalion in front of Lin Qian instantly exploded. The exploding Shin power formed a wild sea that swallowed up Lin Qian. One hand holding tightly onto the immemorial sword, Lin Qian was protected behind the shield of light. He was filled with regret. A famed general had died so simply. Wanting to take him down as well? Pity. Suddenly, Lin Qian seemed to detect something. Almost at the same time, a great power collided with his light shield. The light shield immediately shattered. This was Shuang Yu's attack before his death. The moment the shield of light shattered, Lin Qian's immemorial shook and formed a round barrier to protect him. Pop pop pop. The surging power seemed to find a target and flooded over. Each wave of power was insignificant to Lin Qian, but they came too quickly and there were too many. The sword circle shattered. Lin Qian gave a muffled grunt. Using this wave of power, he broke free of the wild ocean of power. Having gotten free, Lin Qian looked from afar at the ocean of Shin power. He watched as it gradually calmed, and the ripples of power faded in the air. Such an intense opponent. Lin Qian sighed inwardly. Gu Liangdao's last attack used the entirety of his skill at controlling battle formations. He used the battle formation and astounding technique in control to self-destruct the entire battalion all at once. This kind of thing was never heard of before. Even Lin Qian had to admit that this was an opponent worthy of respect. It was the first time he was wounded after entering God level. The wound was not serious. He would heal after resting for a few days. Lin Qian was not concerned. It was really profitable to pay this small price for destroying a top battle general and a top battalion. A pity that Yang Yuanhao was much more cunning and was harder to find. If Gu Liangdao's desire for revenge hadn't been so strong, Kunlun would not have cornered him so easily. The impact of Gu Liangdao's death would be as a huge one for Mo Cloud C. When he thought of this, Lin Qian was satisfied. At this time, a howling came from afar. The howling seemed to contain the faint tinge of a dragon's presence. Lin Qian looked in the direction of the howl. The horizon seemed to be dyed in red and was unspeakably terrifying. A figure seemed to draw a bloody arc across the sky and was charging over at astonishing speed. The figure suddenly disappeared from view. In the next moment, an upright figure carrying a sword appeared in front of Lin Qian. Lin Qian's pupils suddenly contracted. Wei Sheng. What caused Lin Qian's heart to sink was that other than the faint presence of dragon, Wei Sheng had the same presence as he did. Lin Qian knew what this meant. God level. Wei Sheng was God level. Waves formed inside his mind. In that battle of the Central Plains, he had seen with his own eyes how Wei Sheng had burnt Shin power to fight. He knew what the consequences of burning Shin power were. Wei Sheng burning Shin power back then at his power level should have died. Even if he managed to survive, he would be crippled. How could he have entered God level? A hint of sorrow flashed through Wei Sheng's eyes. He had come a step too late. The remnants of Shin power remnants here revealed what that just happened. But when Wei Sheng's gaze landed on Lin Qian's face, it turned to steely determination. Long time no see, Brother Wei. Lin Qian was warm and polite. I hadn't thought that Brother Wei had entered God level as well. Brother Wei has finally found the sword path of your heart, as expected of us Sword Xiu. Wei Sheng shook his head. The sword I practice is not the same as yours. Yes. Lin Qian nodded. It is hard to say who was right or wrong on the path of the sword. However, we can determine who is strong or weak. Wei Sheng, do you dare to fight me in the name of the sword? Lin Qian pointed his sword at Wei Sheng, his white robes flying, his presence intimidating. If it was anyone else, I would give them the chance for a fair fight. But the fight between you and I is not a study of our paths of the sword, it is a matter of vengeance. Wei Sheng did not avoid Lin Qian's gaze and said honestly, I once swore a sword oath to destroy Kunlun for Wu Kong. Today, one of us will die. Wei Sheng's tone was like the hum of a sword, decisive and intimidating. The god-killing blood sword in his hand shrieked as it pointed at Lin Qian. Lin Qian knew that his attempted scheme had failed. He had just been lightly wounded. He would not fear the disadvantage if it was any other person. But he hadn't expected that Wei Sheng was also god level. This seemingly insignificant wound could prove to be fatal in a battle between god level experts. He had originally wanted to arouse Wei Sheng's devotion to the sword and take advantage attack his psyche. He had thought that Wei Sheng would fall for it. Even if he didn't, it would leave behind a shadow in his herd because he had one unfairly. He hadn't thought that Wei Shang was honest and true to himself. A person like this could not be affected by simple words. The unpredictable consequences of his past machinations had created such a great enemy in Mo Cloud Sea. One could only say that fate was fickle. Lin Xian threw away his stray thoughts. While he was at a disadvantage, he was not scared. He smiled. All right. As Kunluan's eldest Xixiang and Wukong eldest Xixiang, then in the name of eldest Xixiang, let's settle this. Peerless Kunluan and that rural little sect Wu Kong Sword Sect were finally placed on equal ground for the first time by the words from Lin Xian's mouth. Wei Shang's expression was normal, but his heart was affected. Teachers and sect, this disciple's Wei Shang finally got this chance. The god-killing blood sword in Wei Shang's hand seemed to feel Wei Shang's fury, sorrow, and excitement. It vibrated, and the entire sky turned bloody red. The sky roiled, and the rampaging killing intent filled the world. The grass and trees on the ground quickly withered. The rivers ran red. Fissures opened on the ground, and there seemed to be blood flowing out. The entire Jia seemed to become a hellish world of blood. The immemorial sword trembled violently in Lin Xian's hand. Sharp peerless sword essences met in the air and exploded. The threads of bloody energy would be torn apart when they got close to Lin Xian. Feeling the fighting spirit of the immemorial sword in his hand, Lin Xian bowed his head and said with unusual determination, "Master, this disciple will not shame the name of Kunluan." Raising his head, Lin Xian's pupils turned into a metallic blue. The sharp killing intent became slightly more grave. The red and the blue Shen swords faced off like fated enemies. Bihan looked indifferently at the dazzling variations of Mu Xian Battalion's formations as though it did not matter. He could see the others' intentions. Mu Xian wanted to delay him until the reinforcements came. Pity, if Mu Xian knew that Shuidong was being delayed by Gongsun Sha and Minan had suffered heavy fatalities, would she still act this way? Bihan's gaze swept across the bodies of Xin Battalion. Those faces that were so similar. He thought of the memorial tablets placed neatly on the altars in Resting Island. No tablet was missing. All of the Xin Battalion members were represented there. The present Xin Battalion was not the Xin Battalion of the past. The new Xin Battalion possessed complete souls. From when they were born, they were mentally connected to Bihan. They were closer to Mo steeds than puppets, but they kept the battle instincts of the previous Xin Battalion members. Almost all of Mo Cloud Sea's Shin crystals had been spent on recreating Xin Battalion. This Xin Battalion was most likely the most expensive battalion in the world. When the last memorial tablet was placed, the last chain on Bihan's heart was shattered. The new Xin Battalion caused him to feel joy and hope as though he was a child. The past Xin Battalion had been weighed down by an aura of death. The present Xin Battalion brimmed with life. He had stepped through the border of gray and hopelessness to touch the warmth of sunshine. They had watched him study tactics under the dim lantern light in the lonely and cold days at Xiankong Temple. They had listened to him mumble to himself. No matter how difficult or hard, they had never left him. Rest. Please do not worry about me. A hint of warmth flashed through Bihan's eyes. He raised his head, his eyes turning icy again. Mu Xian Battalion changed formations at an astounding rate, but it didn't cause a ripple in his mind. Mu Xian Battalion was the most varied battalion he had ever seen. They were like a puddle of water that could change formation to fit the situation as they wished. If an ordinary battalion encountered an enemy like this, they would find it troublesome. But for Bihan, he could see their weakness at a glance. Mu Xian Battalion pursued variation, but they were much less skilled in terms of both defensive and offensive power. Complex variations that lacked power were just decorative flourishes at his level. Bihan took a deep breath. Wisps of flame flew out of every member of Xin Battalion. Thousands of wisps of flame flew, rising into the sky in a beautiful display. Arsonist, lit up. The flames quickly entered Bihan's body. The layers of flames flowed along the surface of the Shin device and feathers made of fire grew freely. The icy blue Mo matrix at his neck flashed with eerie light. Mu Xian's expression changed slightly. Mo fighting methods. She suddenly remembered that Bihan was a battle general skilled at fighting in both Xiuzha and Mo styles. Xin Battalion was also the only battalion that could fight in both styles. Mu Xian also knew the strengths and weaknesses of her battalion. She did not fear the unreasonable attacks of the Mo. In her view, the Mo fighting tactics were savage, lacked technique, and ultimately were all the same. She did not fear ordinary Mo battle generals. While one person with strength could defeat 10 with skill, the battle style that focused on variation relied on softness to subdue hardness. In terms of battle formation transformations, Mu Xian believed that her battalion was at the top. No battalion was perfect. While surrounded by fire, Bihan's heart was as cold as ice. His obsessive cold demeanor meant that he was always clear-minded no matter the situation. The battle formation changed again. Threads of sword energies were like an enormous whirlpool. Any strong attacks would be skinned by these sword energies until they disappeared. Pity, many enemies would forgot that before the battle with the Mo martial alliance's Shang Yishang, Bihan had never relied on Mo fighting tactics to become a top battle general. Battle formation variations were also one of the weapons that Bihan was skilled in. Bihan's gaze was completely cold, his lips curving icily. Having let go of his burdens, Bihan was still obsessive, still mad, but was also calmer. He reached out and pointed in the air at the center of the sword energy whirlpool. The surging power exploded at his fingertip. A blinding red light fell like a comet towards the center of Mu Xian's battalion. It did not stop there. The other fingers on Bihan's hand tapped in the air as though he was playing an instrument. For even smaller red dots of light flew towards the corners of the whirlpool, positioning themselves in a formation. 5-star formation break. Translator ramblings, can you imagine this story if Wei Shang and Lin Qian were on the same side? That would have been a one-sided battle. If you find any errors, ads pop-up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 904, Bihan vs. Mu Xian. Chapter 904, Bihan vs. Mu Xian. Bihan's journey of becoming a battle general was more difficult than most stories suggested. People only heard that Shen Kong Temple had two outstanding geniuses, one called Jiang Jia and the other Bihan. However, only a rare few knew of the truth. Bihan had displayed his talents very early on, but his sensitive heritage became an obstacle for him learning more. Therefore, he could only learn and model tactics and strategies on his own. He was like a lonely genius that learned through repeated trial and error, discarded in a corner. His obsessiveness and cold demeanor had formed during that time. Even later, while he was leading Xin Battalion, other than receiving the right to read the Battle General Jade Scrolls, no one taught him, and no one conversed with him. However, he was like all of the silent and stoic geniuses. He did a simple thing repeatedly. Battle formations were one of the things he studied the most thoroughly, and one of the few things he could study. He had studied all the battle formations variations in the Jade Scrolls that Shen Kong Temple allowed him to read. He was not satisfied with memorizing them, he had started to deconstruct each one, model and try to understand them from the source. Xin Battalion became his experimental subjects, and the way to test if he was correct. He had found many solutions to formations that other people did not know. The 5-star formation break was one of those. This method did not come from any Jade Scroll. This was a simple and effective way to resolve, developed after reading and synthesizing a large number of battle formations. This was the first time he used it in combat. The 5 dots of light seemed to slowly enter the whirlpool. The constantly moving whirlpool suddenly stilled. Mu Xian was astounded. What was this? This whirlpool sword formation was one of her best sword formations. This had never occurred before in past battles. Even the most powerful attacks would be dissolved in the sword formation. This was. She could feel that there seemed to be an invisible barrier that separated the sword energies from each other. She almost didn't believe her eyes. How was it possible? The reason that the whirlpool sword formation was powerful was because the sword energies were connected in a special way. They could attract and repel each other. The sword energies formed a sticky field between them. Water was only powerful when it was flowing. Once it slowed down, its power greatly decreased. What were those 5 dots of light? As the sword energies flowed slower and slower, Mu Xian's expression became ugly. She immediately decided and shouted, 3-charge sword formation. The battle formation that had been in the shape of a whirlpool suddenly scattered. The battle formation rippled as though it was water, each layer rhythmically opening and closing. Suddenly the sword shio at the very back of the battle formation released sword energies. From the back of the battle formation, they started to release sword energies. The waves gathered. When the sword energies appeared at the front of the formation, the sword energies were a furious wave. Whoosh! The angry wave formed out of thousands of sword energies released a sound that made people tremble. Bihan was expressionless. How could he not recognize a foundational formation like the 3-charge sword formation? 3-charge sword formation, with each wave being stronger than the last, and the waves were connected. When the first wave reached the enemy, the third wave would have been prepared. One wave after another rushing forth, each wave stronger than the last. Simple, but at Mu Xian Battalion's skill level most people would panic at the continuous onslaught. Each sword shio in Mu Xian's sword battalion was outstanding. The sword energies they released were condensed and powerful. Their actions could be called perfect, and they were accurately controlled. The gathering of almost 10,000 sword energies was not disorganized at all. Bihan knew what Mu Xian thought. Mu Xian was preying on the fact that Xin Battalion did not have many people. 3-charge sword formation, not a clever sword formation. Its strength relied on the number of people and the training. Mu Xian Battalion had the advantage of numbers. As one of Coenluen's top battalions, she had been able to easily form a large battalion out of Coenluen's powerful sword Xiu system. If she did not have a preference for female Xiu, the size of her battalion could have been larger. Unlike Xuedong, Mu Xian did not pick the strongest sword Xiu, but emphasized the sword Xiu's ability to obey orders and their discipline. Her battalion was easy to replenish, and due to this, her numbers were high. She had suffered a small loss at Gongye Xiaorong's hands only a short while ago, but she had still easily supplemented her numbers to almost 10,000 people. Bihan was not affected. A fight between top battalions did not depend on numbers. Facing the howling sword energy waves, Bihan was expressionless. He suddenly moved and charged towards the howling sword energy waves. Xin Battalion spread out silently behind him. He chopped with his hand. The red hand energy was like a blade. Xin Battalion all chopped with their hands in unison. The thousands of red hand energies flew like birds into the hand energy Bihan released. The energy suddenly multiplied exponentially in size and roared intimidatingly as it faced the sword energy waves. One blue energy, one red energy. One surging powerfully, one razor sharp. Bihan's next move made people jump in fright. Charging at the formation, He led Xin Battalion and drew out threads of red energy in the air to follow closely behind the red hand energy and charged. Was this person crazy? Mu Xian stilled and almost exclaimed in shock. If the two waves of power collided head-on, it would explode. Wasn't charging at this time seeking death? The power of a Shun power collision at such a strength was enough to flatten a town. Even Xin Battalion would die if they were in range of the clash. Bihan was moving with his back slightly bent. Xin Battalion moved the same way he did. They followed closely behind Bihan in their battle formation. If this was at any other place, Mu Xian would find it clownish and laughable, but right now, she couldn't laugh. Because he was Bihan. Mu Xian's eyes were wide. She didn't even dare to blink. When she saw what happened next, she almost didn't believe her eyes. Hiss! Like thick cloth tearing, the reddened blade seemed to slice through butter. The flaming red energy easily cut through the first sword energy wave. Bam! When the red energy cut through the sword energy wave exploded like a pillow stuffed with feathers. Tens of thousands of sword energies exploding like feathers made a spectacular scene. That bam was not loud, but it was akin to thunder in Mu Xian's ears. She looked dazedly at the sword energies shooting into the sky. They were completely out of control. He had disrupted her attack so easily. How was it possible? How was it possible? The scene in front of her completely upended all of her knowledge. She had never heard of this counter against the 3-charge sword formation. A term jumped into her mind: deconstruction. Yes, it was deconstruction. The sword energy wave was deconstructed in moments. That was why there was no explosion. The uncontrolled sword energies entered Bihan's battalion. Xin Battalion lit up with light. At the center of the battle formation, an enormous white lotus appeared and slowly spun. It gave off faint walls of light. The sword energies only created small ripples when they hit the curtains of light. Mu Xian recognized this battle formation. A classic defense battle formation from Xian Kong Temple, with Lotus Protector. Mu Xian was astounded, but the battle did not pause at all. The icy blue Zuo Mo matrix on Bihan's face suddenly lit up. The fiery blade in front of him made an extremely small tilt. Hiss! Bam! The sounds were the same as before, and the effects were the same. The second wave of sword energies were immediately broken down. The sword energies filled the sky. Hiss! Bam! The third sword energy wave arrived quickly after and almost reached Bihan at the same moment the second wave did. However, it was not of any threat to Bihan. Mu Xian's heart felt a chill. She smelt the scent of danger. She felt a threat of terror at Bihan's skill in battle formations. She had never thought that there would be a day that she would be defeated in the field she was best in. Bihan's understanding of the 3-charge sword formation was greater than hers. She could not do what he did. She knew that Bihan's fire blade had to have been aimed at the crucial point of the sword energy wave to have such stunning effects. However, while she understood it, she still felt great fear. That wave was made from almost 10,000 sword energies. They were more than tens of thousands of changes occurring in one instant. He was able to find the weakness of the sword energy wave among such complex changes. She could not do it. However, there was no time for her to think. Bihan had closed the distance between them. If this was a few moments ago, she would have been overjoyed. Their most effective move was to use the sword formation to trap the enemy. But now, she lost all confidence. Would the sword formation be able to trap the enemy? She didn't dare to think deeply about this question. She forced herself to calm down. The long sword in her hand waved down. The battalion spread out around her in response. In the sky, Bihan saw all this. He was unaffected and continued to follow the hand energy. Sin battalion silently changed position around him. The Wood Lotus Protector formation suddenly shifted into a classic offensive formation, Fearless Charge formation. The Fearless Charge formation came from the Fearless Seal of the Diana Xiao. It emphasized being fearless in mind, and all minds as one, to attack from the front and defeat others based on strength. How could Mu Xian not recognize the famed Fearless Charge formation? She took a deep breath and raised her sword. A round sword energy floated up under her feet. Inside the flowing battle formation, everyone raised their flying swords like Mu Xian. Round sword essence appeared below each person's feet. Round hold formation. Round shapes rose from under the sword show, sliding across their bodies and flying into the sky along their swords. If one looked down from above, they would see thousands of round sword essences. They looked soft and weak like a group of jellyfish floating out of the ocean. Round hold formation was the counter to Fearless Charge formation. Any battle general that had proper training in Kowloon would not make a mistake in this. The four great sects of the past had competed intensely and were familiar with each other's battle formations. In the training of battle generals, there were descriptions of the classical battle formations of other sects and how to defeat them. Kowloon battle formations focused on offensive power. The round hold formation, however, was the best choice to defeat the Fearless Charge formation. Even Xiankong Temple's teaching materials in the past emphasized that one could not use the Fearless Charge formation against Kowloon's round hold formation. Bihan's lips were in an imperceptible curve. Just as he expected. He had no real intentions of changing. The distance between the two sides was rapidly decreasing. Sin battalion suddenly flashed with light. Bihan's hands moved like flowers blooming. A golden giant hand appeared in front of the battle formation. The hand formed the Fearless Seal. A fearless and powerful presence suddenly formed. When the Fearless Seal appeared, it was like a mountain pressing down. The presence was so ferocious people felt as though they could not fight back. That red hand energy seemed insignificant in comparison. Mu Xian was puzzled that Bihan was following through on the attack, but she didn't have time to think. She could only prepare to receive the attack. Yet unexpectedly, that powerful and enormous Fearless Seal suddenly sank and hit that red hand energy that had been dismissed by others already. Translator ramblings, not much to say. The character development of Bihan is coming a bit late though. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 905 Wei Shang Sword. Chapter 905 Wei Shang Sword. The hand energy did not shatter. It seemed to disappear into the air propelled by the hand energy. In the next moment, it penetrated deep into the round hold formation. Mu Xian's mind was overwhelmed with fear. That terrifying energy had brushed past her body. The sharpness caused her hairs to stand on end. The sword shio to the side of her were not so fortunate. The surrounding emptiness caused her to feel as though she was exposed in the air and she had no sense of safety. There seemed to be an empty street next to her. When one looked down from the sky, there was a terrifying wound that cut a path through the entire battalion. Mu Xian had experienced many battles of various sizes. She had experienced danger before, but today was the most dangerous one. The danger had come so suddenly and without any warning. When the blade energy had brushed past her, she hadn't been able to move at all. In the sky, Bihan thought it was a pity, his aim was off. If he had killed Mu Xian with that blow, then this battle would have been finished. However, he quickly threw the thought to the back of his mind and his thoughts returned to the battle occurring right now. Soon, Bihan seemed to detect something in the enemy battalion. The attack just now seemed to have given a greater shock to the enemy than he had imagined. The enemy still appeared as though they had not recovered and their reactions were delayed. An opportunity. Bihan perceptibly realized this was a rare opportunity. Sin battalion were like opportunistic wolves that roamed around Mu Xian battalion. When they found a chance, they would bite. Bihan was extremely precise. He would cause a river of blood flow of blood with each attack. He closely circled the perimeter of Mu Xian battalion with Sin battalion and charged a few times. In a few short rounds, Mu Xian battalion had suffered heavy fatalities. Mu Xian finally recovered. Seeing the battle formation wavering, she felt extremely frustrated. She had been scared by Bihan. That should not happen. Mu Xian forced herself to be alert. She knew that if she wasn't careful today, she might end up dead. She suddenly thought of Shui Don's orders. Delay Bihan and find time for me Nan and Shui Don to perform a pincer movement. Her eyes immediately lit up. She recognized that Bihan's skill in battle formations were higher than hers, but if she decided to stay on the defense, it would not be easy for Bihan to win. Delay. Having made her decision, Mu Xian immediately changed tactics. Bihan quickly detected the transformation in his enemy. His mind moved and he guessed Mu Xian's intentions. Delay? He was expressionless as he started to slow the pace of battle and slowly roamed around Mu Xian battalion. Given her training, Mu Xian could focus for a long time, but her battalion could not maintain focus as long. They would eventually get tired, get distracted, or relax. But Xin battalion would not have this problem. As long as Bihan was focused, Xin battalion would be focused. Bihan had enough patience. He was also not in a hurry. Even if the opponent was Shui Don, he was confident in Gong Sun Sha's abilities. As to Mi Nan, Bihan dismissed him. In Bihan's opinion, Mi Nan had lost the qualifications to be a top battle general. Mi Nan looked powerful, but in reality the ability of his battalion had decayed a great deal. They had lost the focus in their mind. Mu Shuang had fewer people, but Mu Shuang, who fought with the intent to die, had the ability to drag Mi Nan into hell. At this time, with Bihan holding this region, the pressure on the supply lines decreased greatly and large amounts of resources and people had started to gather towards Mu Shuang. Also, Bihan just received news that Gong Xiaorong had not gone back to recover but moved towards Mu Shuang's defense line. Bihan knew that Gong Xiaorong was not going there to defeat Mi Nan but to prevent Mu Shuang from seeking his death. Bihan looked coldly at Mu Xian battalion. Boom boom boom. The blue and red figures in the sky rapidly changed position in the air and collided constantly. With every collision, terrifying Shen power would explode like a volcano. Shen power vibrations that could be seen with the naked eye swept at everything. Under their feet, the mountains collapsed, the ground cracked, and terrifying cracks and bottomless holes dotted the landscape. Even the sky started to show cracks. The red figure was shrouded in blood as though he had just been drenched in a bloody pool. The sword in his hand gave bloodthirsty whines. With every blow, it created mists of blood. The blue figure was untouched by dust, elegant and dignified. The sharp presence of his sword reached into the sky. Each blow seemed to slice through the world, and could not be stopped. This Jia started to show signs of collapsing under the blows of the two god levels. Wei Sheng was cold like granite, and would put all of his power behind each blow. The pairing of the powerful Dragon Heart's ability to make blood in the god-killing blood sword was a match made in heaven. He was devoted to the sword to start with, and his heart towards the sword had never changed in the many years. Adding on that he did not have to pay attention to other matters, his sword essence was a fraction purer than Lin Qian. The savage god-killing blood sword was securely under his control. The bloody mists caused the world to be filled with the tang of blood, but it didn't affect Wei Sheng at all. Lin Qian was amazed. He had not underestimated Wei Sheng, but he hadn't expected that Wei Sheng's accomplishments in the sword were greater than he had imagined. Lin Qian had been the most outstanding genius in Kunlun's history. Excelling in every area, he had talent that people envied, including cultivation. He was the leader of Kunlun, and still no one in Kunlun could rival the speed of his cultivation. His skill in the sword surpassed his master, and no one in Kunlun's history could rival him. But he had not thought that there would be someone even stronger than him. The other's god-killing blood sword was astoundingly powerful. Lin Qian could feel with each crossing of the swords that the immemorial sword in his hand would be corroded slightly by the blood. If this was a normal time, Lin Qian would be able to eliminate the blood's corrosive taint with a thought. However, the two were in the midst of their fight. They would cross swords hundreds of times in a breath. He had to focus all of his attention to block, parry, and counter the blows. He had not time to take care of the corrosion. Fortunately, the immemorial sword was not weaker than the god-killing blood sword, and was even a fraction stronger. The other's god-killing blood sword would also receive wounds from the sharp presence of the immemorial Shun sword. Both sides were gritting their teeth and holding on, not even giving up a step. Lin Qian's light injury gradually caused him to end up disadvantaged. Wei Sheng's expression did not change. He was fighting intensely, but his mind had gone far away. Where was the limits of the sword? He still hadn't found the answer. The limits of the sword were what he had pursued all this time. He suddenly thought of the experiences of his cultivation, of Wukong Mountain, the sect leader, the masters. He thought of being with Zuo Mo and the others at the sealed extinction battlefield. The sword oath roared in his ears like thunder. countless faces flashed through the blood ocean in front of him. What was the sword? He had reached god level, but his sword still couldn't bring the sect leader and the others back to life. A hint of bewilderment flashed through his eyes. He instinctively waved the god-killing blood sword in his hand. A great power came and he suddenly refocused. A hint of understanding formed. What was the limit of the sword? He still didn't have an answer, but at this time, he understood something else. The river of life was fickle, and people were living in the present. Even the strongest sword could bring back lost happiness. The meaning of the sword was to protect and guard the present happiness. His brothers, family. The resolve of his oath. The sword was his life, his heart. Only with the sword in hand could he protect those things he held dearest. He was willing to use his life to guard this happiness. This was his sword. Something seemed to silently shatter in Wei Shang's body. His mind was completely calm and at peace. As though it felt Wei Shang's thoughts, the god-killing blood sword suddenly exploded with light. The savagery within the bloody light disappeared along with the tang of blood. The bloody light was pure and a soft red like that of a crystal. There was an honest presence that reached people's hearts. Lin Qian immediately felt the difference. Originally, there had been a thread of savagery and hate in Wei Shang's sword essence. This thread was powerful, but Lin Qian was not affected. He didn't feel any regret or feel guilt about what had happened in the past. He had carried out the plan for Kunlun. His life and soul only belonged to Kunlun. All other things were ants in his eyes. But right now, Wei Shang's sword essence was peaceful and neutral with an open aura. It caused him to feel even more pressure. The enemy's sword essence seemed to have suddenly multiplied in weight. With each blow, the flow of his Shin power was disrupted roiled. This was. His gaze landed on Wei Shang's face and his eyes narrowed. There was no hate on Wei Shang's face. His gaze was as clear as water. Yet Lin Qian could also see the determination in Wei Shang's eyes was stronger than before. Epiphany. He was having an epiphany at this time. Lin Qian's heart sank. When it came to their level, techniques were not the most important. They fought based on sword essence, mind, Shin power, and resolve. Each attack contained their understanding of sword essence and the laws of the world. The first person unable to withstand it would be affected in all areas by the other in mind, vision, and sound. Each of their attacks were fatal for those not in god level, but the two could understand the mysteries of each other's sword path. They both knew that trickery was useless against both themselves and the other. But they did not retreat. The rate of attack on both sides was astounding. The danger was something those not in god level could understand. Their Shin power was also used up at an astounding speed. They had absorbed all the Shin power of this Jie. The Jie started to collapse. In Lin Qian's eyes, Wei Shang became larger and larger. He was like a god of war. Each blow was filled with the power to destroy the world. Lin Qian knew that this was because his mind was infiltrated by Wei Shang's sword essence and had started to waver. The Shen power in his body was almost used up. Wei Shang became even stronger as he fought. This did not mean that Wei Shang's Shen power was stronger than Lin Qian. Wei Shang had gained a stronger and more sturdy mind. After breaking through the mental barrier, Wei Shang's mind was indestructible. The light injury Lin Qian had received earlier had been a minuscule opening, but now the opening was being gradually enlarged. Lin Qian knew that he would lose in 20 breaths. He only had one option. Leave. Flee. Lin Qian sighed inwardly. This departure would leave a deep shadow on his mind. He didn't know how much effort it would take to resolve it. For Kunlun. Resolve flashed through Lin Qian's mind. Editor's note, https://youtube.be/9jk-ncrmvcw?t=13s. Translator ramblings, oh no! The main character effect is occurring. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 906, The Death of Minan. Chapter 906, The Death of Minan. Princess Xia was nervous. She had taken leadership of the clan years ago. Under her command, the family had developed very well in these past years. While they needed to thread the razor-thin crack between the major factions, she was skilled, soft in appearance but a spirit of steel. Her resolve was hardened and she was never discouraged. All of the family respected her. She was still as beautiful as those days in Great Peace City, but her features were more mature. The sudden summons still caused her anxiety. Emotion Temple was already so strong that she needed to look up at them. The Nether King was even stronger, made her wary and feel uncertainty. She had paid attention to the war between the Nether King and the Emotion Temple in these recent days. The fighting intense, and Emotion Temple was on the losing side. Emotion Temple could not find any allies in 100 Savage Realm. Everyone had determined it was a matter of time before the Nether King united the MO. This person who was very likely to become the ruler of all MO sudden had summoned her. Princess Xia didn't know whether good fortune or misfortune was waiting for her. Please enter, King has been waiting for you. A high-level MO battle general politely ushered Princess Xia in. An MO was out on his campaign, so he had picked a few from his guard to act as attendants. These people had followed an MO during the 7-day miracle. They were absolutely loyal. The battle general was dazzled by Princess Xia's beauty for a moment. Did King like this type? Princess Xia focused and carefully walked into the large hall. A white-haired male seemed to be looking off into the distance. He heard Princess Xia's voice and turned around. Long time no see. Princess Xia saw that familiar yet strange face and was stunned where she stood. Her tears streamed down uncontrollably. Gongye Xiaoron was carefully hiding with his battalion. He only 1,000 people remained of his battalion. All 1,000 had followed him here. Everyone knew now that Tian Huan was gone. But no one deserted because Darren told them that they would need to earn a place for their families with their sweat and blood. Also, Darren had led them to fight Minan. If they were asked who they hated the most in the world, there was only one answer: Minan. This person had been of the highest status in Tian Huan and received countless benefits from the sect, was the cause of Tian Huan's destruction. No one would retreat from a chance to fight Minan. They silently crept closer to the battlefield. Minan battalion did not notice them. The battle between the two sides was extremely harsh. At this point, any significant reinforcements would tip the scale. Minan battalion had called back most of their scouts to focus on the harsh battle. Mu Shuang's battalions were being slowly whittled down, but this was North Tian Huan's territory. It was not difficult to have battalions reinforce them. Also, while Minan's battalion had more elite forces, they could not receive any reinforcements. Mu Shuang was a cold-blooded battle general that was sacrificing an endless stream of ordinary battalions to turn this battlefield into a meat grinder. These average battalions that usually played small roles were fearless because their enemy was Minan, the person Tian Huan hated the most. Countless people among them had their homes destroyed because of this person. The 10-year-long war between North and South Tian Huan had caused their hatred to be etched into their bones. They continued to charge in. Here, lives were just a number. More than 50,000 North Tian Huan soldiers had already fallen here. But when the news passed back to the rear, it did not cause a panic. Instead, more and more battalions flooded over. Some battalions had been preparing to leave North Tian Huan, waiting to enter Mo Cloud Sea, yet they turned back. In some battalions where their commanders were not willing to return, many soldiers left their battalions and formed small groups to come back. If even Mu Shuang Darren was willing to die with Minan, then what did their lives mean in comparison? Minan was trapped here by the cannon fodder. Many times, he thought he was about to break free, but the crazed and fearless attacks of the enemy caused the chances to be stolen away. Looking around and seeing the dispirited morale on the faces of his commanders, Minan felt cold inside. Why was it like this? He was a top battle general. His battalion was a top battalion. Why had they reached such a state? There was less than half of his battalion left. Even scarier was that deserters had started to appear since yesterday night. Minan had been lead the military for so many years, and it was the first time desertion had occurred in his battalion. He knew that this battalion that was pride was not far from total collapse. But he did not have a solution. He couldn't even retreat. If his timing in joining Kunlun hadn't been perfect, they would not have received the benefits they did. Kunlun was full of talent, and they had no room for outsiders. If he did not complete this mission successfully, what would await him upon his return would only be a cold treatment. Kunlun would not trust him any longer. His clansmen would lose everything. They would never see a bright future again. He could die, but he could not retreat. While he was willing to fight to the death, his battalion was not willing. A Tian Huan battalion fighting to the death for Kunlun? What nonsense was that? Minan was extremely discouraged. What he didn't realize was that there were 1,000 pairs of hate-filled eyes staring at him from the darkness. Gongye Xiaorong's sneak attack had been timed to perfection. Minan battalion had just begun falling back to their next defensive position, yet Gongye Xiaorong attacked before they could organize. Minan battalion that had been already close to the edge of defeat instantly collapsed. Kill Minan! Kill Minan! The shouts rang over the entire camp. Minnan Battalion was like a group of headless flies. Many people even turned in panic and headed into the darkness. Their performance was like that of the most amateur battalion. There were no traces of an elite top battalion left. Minnan seemed to age decades in a moment. He stood dazed in the wind and did not seem to hear the sounds of combat coming closer. A sharp light sliced towards his neck. He stood motionlessly like a man made out of wood. A head flew into the sky. The expression was still wooden. Bihan Sin Battalion had circled around Mu Xian Battalion for hours as though they didn't know exhaustion. Mu Xian did not dare to relax at all. She knew if they were the least bit careless, Bihan would show his fangs. She continued to motivate her troops to be alert. As long as they could outlast Bihan, they would win. Time slowly passed. As time passed, Mu Xian's heart felt even colder. She could not imagine someone maintaining a random pattern like this for over 10 hours. Bihan's paths did not ever repeat, and she could not predict his next movement at all. Such a terrifying person. Mu Xian had a bad feeling. Even though she constantly reminded them, there were many of her subordinates that couldn't help but get distracted. Bihan's attack happened suddenly without any warning. Bihan was like an épée blade that instantly pierced into a corner of Mu Xian Battalion. In that moment, blood sprayed and limbs flew. Many people hadn't even managed to refocus when the god of death had snuffed their lives out. One attack and then a retreat. Before Mu Xian could counterattack, Sin Battalion had fled like lightning and returned to their roaming state. This battalion was all made up of female sword xiu. While each of them were experienced in battle, they were still females. The sudden bloody scene caused their faces to change expression. They did not fear death or battle, but they were repulsed by such a bloody scene, especially when it happened next to them. This time, no one dared to relax. All of them were on their guard. Bihan once again resumed his seemingly sleepy state. He led Sin Battalion to roam randomly around Mu Xian Battalion. Night came. Mu Xian's heart was nervous again. She felt great panic, yet no matter how she tried, she could not get in contact with Minnan and Xuedong. Had something happened to them? Mu Xian suddenly had a bad feeling. She looked down on people like Minnan. If someone had betrayed Kunlun, she would be the first to cut their head off. If the sect leader hadn't asked for them to be polite, Mu Xian would not have shown Minnan any politeness. Mu Xian was not the only one. All of Kunlun had a terrible opinion of Minnan. The unity of Kunlun was something that people found it hard to imagine. Due to this, they looked down and disdained a person like Minnan that had betrayed his sect after receiving countless privileges. But Xuedong? Who could stop Xuedong? She didn't believe it. But up until now, she still couldn't see any sign of Xuedong Battalion. Even scarier was that she couldn't get into contact with Xuedong. Xuedong Battalion was Kunlun's strongest battalion. Xuedong's status in Kunlun was one unmatched by any other battle general. Due to this, Xuedong Battalion had recruited almost all of the best of Kunlun. The over half of the children of Kunlun were in Xuedong Battalion. Every sword xiu in the battalion had passed through 6 rounds of exams and selection. Each one was powerful. Xuedong had peerless skill. Adding on the battalion sword xiu that had been chosen those successive rounds of selection, the countless experts, the harsh training, Mu Xian believed that there was no other battalion like Xuedong Battalion. Even Gu Liangdao, who was famed in the world, had been badly defeated when he encountered Xuedong. Who would defeat such a battalion? Mu Xian didn't believe it. While Bihan was strong and Sin Battalion was more powerful than expected, she believed if Xuedong came then Bihan would not have a chance at all. But, what trouble had Xuedong encountered? The bad feeling increased. The mission this time had been rocky everywhere. The conflict between Kunlun and Mo Plowed Sea could not be avoided. It was time for the two to grapple. Yet unlike the unstoppable victory she had imagined, she felt as though they were encountering obstacles everywhere. Her defeat to Gongye Xiaorong's counterattack had been due to her own carelessness, but she had not held anything back in her battle against Sin Battalion and she was still being suppressed. Bihan was stronger than she imagined, and she had a feeling that Bihan was still not using all of his strength. Was this Mo Plowed Sea's true power? Read this post or read below. Hello everybody. As you are aware, World of Cultivation will be coming to an end in little over a week. The entire time Wikwi and I, Wandering Yumi of Doom, have worked on this project, we have never accepted donations for our work. However, we wish to commemorate the conclusion of the project by crowdfunding for a charity. What we want to ask of our readers today is that you donate to Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. They are a charity dedicated to fighting illiteracy by providing young children with books. We have selected this charity for the following reasons: the appropriateness of the charity given our work, and that the charity operates in the same countries. The vast majority, 75% plus, of our readers are from Australia, Canada, the UK, and USA. Below is the link to the donation page for Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. We thank you in advance if you decide to participate and donate. Feel free to write a comment under the post if you choose to donate. Link: https://imaginationlibrary.com/shop number !/p/400653881/category =1055718 Cheers and thank you for all the support. Wikwi and Wandering Yumi of Doom. P.S. We will not be releasing the chapters faster for donations. One a day, start to finish, y'all. Translator Ramblings: a certain Yumi has a countdown playlist. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 907, The Dawn is Near. Chapter 907, The Dawn is Near. Yan Yuanhao looked at the message on his hand. Frozen like a statue, he stood motionless for a while. He felt shocked that Gu Liangdao had died in combat. Before they had acted, no one had thought that full-out war between Kunlun and Mo Cloud Sea would start like this. Even now, he was slightly dazed. An arrow that left the bow could not turn back. Even if he could go back, he did not have many choices. He believed that Gu Liangdao would make the same choices. Kunlun, haha. Pity. Gu Liangdao died. His situation was extremely similar to Gu Liangdao's. The only difference was that Gu Liangdao had been given more responsibilities. While Yang Yuanhao was the sword and shield for the four minor Diana sects, there were still people above him shielding him from the wind and rain of internal politics. But Gu Liangdao didn't have anyone to support him. He didn't from the beginning. He betrayed Shixian. Afterwards he became the leader of Shixian with Zhongde's support, but lost that support in the Battle of the Central Plains. But he wasn't Zuo Mo. As a battle general, Gu Liangdao was outstanding. He had both the bravery and the cleverness. His defeat to Xuedong was more a defeat to Kunlun than to Xuedong. From the start, Gu Liangdao had been burdened with too many responsibilities. He had no choices and no escape. For example, betraying Shixian. If he was not forced to the precipice, who was willing to betray their sect? Just like that, he became the leader of an area. Yang Yuanhao felt that those things were the true burden that had crushed the spirit as a top battle general. Not every person was Zuo Mo. Yang Yuanhao thought of the phrase again. Yang Yuanhao had a clear measure of himself, just like his combat style. He would also make the rational choice. It might not be the best, but it would never be the worst. Yang Yuanhao did not charge blindly into Kunlun. While the battalions stationed here were not a match for him, he did not feel it was rational to enter too deeply. He would lack both supplies and reinforcements. The strategic value he could produce here would be limited, but there would be little danger. The present situation was unlike in the past. Mo Cloud Sea and Kunlun had started an all-out war. He needed to reconsider the situation. Zuo Mo had not returned, Gongsun Cha and Bihan were mobilized. Now, he needed to think for himself. When Wei Sheng's message came, he almost didn't believe it. He looked dazedly at it for a long time. Wei Sheng had defeated Lin Qian. Lin Qian had ran away. This. The result of any battle at the front lines, even Gongsun Cha defeating Xuedong, would not give Yang Yuanhao a deeper shock than this news. Illogical. It was illogical. That was Lin Qian. The sect leader of Kunlun, Lin Qian. After a long days, Yang Yuanhao started to recover. He started to think of the effect this matter would produce. He had to admit that this news was an enormous blow to the morale of Kunlun. Lin Qian's status in Kunlun was unparalleled. He was publicly thought to be the most outstanding of all the sect leaders in Kunlun's history. Even in this revolutionary era, he was flawless. Kunlun had been constantly strengthening themselves. If one had to talk about his only mistake, it would have been not having stopped Mo Cloud Sea from developing. But who could have stopped Mo Cloud Sea? Lin Qian was the manifestation of perfection. He was humble and refined, his loyalty towards Kunlun deeply engraved into his bones. Even the most rebellious sect disciples listened to his every word. He had ventured deep into the Mo realms and defeated them all with his own power. He had been the one to comprehend Shin power and lead Kunlun into the era of Shin power. He had brought great change to Kunlun, using Chao Xian and the other young disciples. Kunlun became the only one of the four great sects to have not declined and fractured. He had never been defeated, he led the group, he was a born leader. But a person like this had been defeated. Yang Yuanhao suddenly realized that Kunlun was pushed to the edge of the cliff. He had never expected Lin Xian's defeat. The war between Kunlun and Mo Cloud Sea had just started and the situation had changed unexpectedly. In Yang Yuanhao's eyes, Lin Xian was undoubtedly Kunlun's strongest point, and also the one that could not fail at all. Even though Wei Shang and the others had returned, Yang Yuanhao had felt it would be good if they could match Lin Xian. Defeating Mu Xian or Shui Dong would not shake the foundations of Kunlun. Only the defeat of Lin Xian would truly cause Kunlun to panic. Lin Xian had been defeated. Kunlun was in danger. Yet the development of events still surprised Yang Yuanhao's predictions. The news that Lin Xian had been defeated by Wei Shang shook the world. Yang Yuanhao had not spread the news. Wei Shang had not been able to track down Lin Xian and decided to go to Kunlun. Wei Shang raced forth with his sword and attacked Kunlun. He did not conceal himself or sneak in. He moved towards the main peak of Tianhuan in broad daylight. Everywhere he passed, he razed cities when he encountered them, he killed enemies when he encountered them, no one could stop him. Kunlun's battalions and experts flooded towards Wei Shang, yet no one could stop them. No one withstood even one of his attacks. Wei Shang used his sword to tell the world how strong a god level was. All of the world was astounded by Wei Shang's strength and unreasonableness. Kunlun panicked. Just like Yang Yuanhao had expected, Lin Xian's defeat caused all of Kunlun to feel anxious. Wei Shang's actions seemed to poke the hornet's nest. All of Kunlun's battalions and experts furiously raced to reinforce the main peak of Kunlun. The main mountain peak of Kunlun was the core of Kunlun. This was where the core of Kunlun was at, this was the holy land for the people of Kunlun. It held unparalleled status, and it had never experienced the fires of war. It was the greatest pride for all of Kunlun. Protect the main peak. Protect the sect leader. Like moths to a flame, they fearlessly charged and tried to stop Wei Shang. Kunlun went mad. The world went mad. Shui Dong's eyes were bloodshot. He completely ignored Vermilion Bird Camp that was following closely after him. He did not care so much. Eldest Xixiang had been defeated? How was it possible? When he had received the news, he almost laughed. How could eldest Xixiang be defeated? He had been in the midst of enjoying his battle with Gongsun Cha. The two were evenly matched. Yet, not long after starting, the news that Wei Shang was making his way to the main peak of Kunlun arrived. He finally understood. Eldest Xixiang had really been defeated. Shui Dong did not hesitate. He immediately led his battalion to charge back towards Kunlun. He felt as though he was in a nightmare. Suddenly, Kunlun was placed in such a precarious position. Protect the main peak. Protect the sect leader. It could be seen how badly Kunlun's position was from this kind of slogan. Mu Xian was trapped by Han Xin battalion and was unable to leave. But he still ordered Mu Xian to return to Kunlun no matter the price. Even if she died. Shui Dong's mind was unusually clear at the moment. Everyone in Kunlun could be sacrificed, even himself. Only eldest Xixiang could not die. He had already started to consider the problem of defeat. The situation was even more urgent, but he became even calmer. Defeat was not something to be scared of. As long as eldest Xixiang was not dead, even if they lost some territory, they could reverse this situation eventually. No matter what the price, they had to stop Wei Shang. Shui Dong battalion traveled as though they did not care for their lives. They truly didn't. They quickly left Vermilion Bird Camp in the dust. Compared to Kunlun's panic, Mo Cloud Sea was overjoyed. Teacher Wei is too strong. He was able to defeat Lin Xian. Heavens! Teacher Wei really returned at the best time. I just knew that Teacher Wei was god level. Please, you only knew after the fact. Just with his own power, he made his way onto the main peak of Kunlun. I can feel my blood boil just thinking about it. Gongsun Cha also had a faint smile on his face. His fight with Shui Dong had been interrupted in the probing stage. Both sides seemed to know that this was not the time for their final fight, so they did not use all of their strength. But in the probing attacks, both sides found the other side troublesome. Gongsun Cha still gaped when he learned Wei Shang was making his way in such an astounding and domineering manner to Kunlun's main peak. The terrifying power of a god level was completely displayed in this battle. Wei Shang managed to disrupt all of Kunlun by himself. Gongsun Cha and the others quickly recovered from their joy. People immediately started to discuss strategies on how to face god level. After half a day of discussion, they arrived at the same conclusion as before: only a god-level expert could match a god-level expert. Otherwise, they would need to wait 10 more years. After everyone's average strength went up 2 more ranks, top-level battalions might have the power to match a god level. The discussion was fruitless, and the discussion turned to discussing the good chance in front of them. If they missed such a great opportunity, they were asking to be struck by lightning. For these people who were full of deviousness, this topic was like the greatest feast. Everyone immediately started a heated discussion. Evil malicious plans quickly took form. When Zuo Mo received the news Wei Sheng defeated Lin Xian, he was also astounded. But soon, the details came and his happiness was diluted. Gu Liang Dao was dead. Shuang Yu was dead. The spirited and open Gu Liang Dao, the gentle and pure Shuang Yu. Thinking of how they had met and interacted those years ago, Zuo Mo's spirits were low. He had thought that everyone would drink together after he returned to Mo Cloud Sea. That would have been a happy occasion. He hadn't expected. Zuo Mo looked motionlessly at the night sky. Ague looked with worry at Zuo Mo. She didn't speak. She knew that young master needed silence at this time. A long time later, Zuo Mo regained his composure and pushed aside his sorrow and grief. There was a line of light on the horizon. Without realizing it, the night had passed, the dawn was near. The dawn was near. The last remnants of grief and sorrow were swept out of Zuo Mo's eyes. What replaced them was determination. He turned around and suddenly said to Ague, "Ague, we need to end this war as soon as possible." Ague looked at Zuo Mo's determined face, and her gaze moved across his snowy white hair. She felt a pain in her heart, and then she nodded seriously, "Yes." Zuo Mo's gaze turned gentle and warm as he stared at Ague. But soon, he became steely-eyed again, as though the mountains of blades and seas of fire in front of him could not stop his steps. The framework for 100 Savage Realms' command structure had been built. Princess Xia and the Lan brothers were familiarizing themselves with their work. The effect of recruiting Princess Xia and the others was outstanding. The regions of 100 Savage Realm that Zuo Mo had conquered quickly stabilized. Everything has been arranged. It's time to take care of the Emotion Temple. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 908, The Chief Mo God's Madness. Chapter 908, The Chief Mo God's Madness. The atmosphere inside the Emotion Temple was extremely tense. The front lines had not experienced continuous defeats, and they had won a few battles, but there was no joy on the faces of the Mo gods. And Mo's army was moving steadily and pushing into their territory. Liang Wei and Chi Xin had not made any risky moves. They only continued to add pressure and press on their holdings. Piece by piece, step by step. This phrase described it best. But the Mo gods were not idiots. They knew that their situation was becoming more and more dangerous. While the enemy's advance was slow, it did not give them any chances to fight back. The enemy was wary, as though they were the weaker side. This kind of fighting strategy caused all of the Emotion Temple great frustration. They could only watch as the enemy slowly marched on them, yet they couldn't do a thing. As the enemy army pushed, their defense line was gradually pushed flat. This was a dangerous sign. A flattened defense line meant that it was easier for the other to break through and bypass their forces. Any battle general knew how dangerous this was. But they had no solutions. They could only watch as they slid towards the cliff edge. Panic and hopelessness spread uncontrollably in their hearts. The difference in power between them was too great. How about we assemble a counterattack? Yoshi Yaku glanced at the Chief Mo God and asked probingly. The Chief Mo God was silent and felt extremely bitter. Counterattack? What could they use to counterattack? The others' battalions did not have any weaknesses. Reinforcing the defense line was prolonging the inevitable, a slow suicide, but if they charged out, they would not come back. The Chief Mo God's eyes swept dazedly across the hall. Compared to the past, the present Emotion Temple was magnificent, but it was cold and unpopulated at this time. Was this the sign of their defeat? He thought of his hard work over the past years. Through the battles, the Emotion Temple had grown and became the strongest factions in the 100 Savage Realm. This had filled the Chief Mo God with pride. He had once believed that the Emotion Temple could not be defeated. Yet when the Nether King's armies came, he found that the seemingly strong Emotion Temple could not stop the others' advance. The enemy was too strong. Compared to the Nether King, the Emotion Temple was too weak. The difference between the two was like that of an adult and a child. It was an uncrossable gap. The Emotion Temple had fought back heartily. Even the Chief Mo God could not ask for more from his subordinates. The rule of the Emotion Temple had been popular in their lands. The Nether King has come? The chief Mo god suddenly spoke. His voice was hoarse. Yes. Yoshi-Yaku nodded. He recruited Princess Xia and the Lan brothers to manage his territories in 100 Savage Realm. This move is beautiful. These two families both have long histories and large networks in 100 Savage Realm. With them in control, the people's hearts are reassured. He shrugged and spread his hands. He said with an expression of helplessness. Of course, it is even more detrimental to us. Fourth, what do you think? The chief Mo god looked at the fourth Mo god that had been silent for a long time. The fourth Mo god was not tall, and looked weak and physical. He had slightly messy hair and a pale face. He looked delicate without any of the power of the Mo. No one would underestimate him due to his appearance. He came from a famous family. The successor of the Silver Catalpa Cavern. This had been recorded in the ancient histories. He was even more mysterious in people's eyes. His name was Shuei. Chief Elder had spent great effort to recruit Shuei to the Emotion Temple to become the fourth Mo god. He wasn't just strong, he was an outstanding battle general. This was also why the chief Mo god thought so greatly of him. In many records, they said that the successors of the Water Moon family also inherited the knowledge of the ancient battle generals. Shuei had not disappointed the chief Mo god, and he had been responsible in large part for the expansion of the Emotion Temple over the past few years. Shuei was quiet, and never made trouble. He also had the skills. No one would dislike a subordinate like him. The final battle is here. Shuei was as calm as usual. He said peacefully, the enemy is about to start a full-out attack. The hall was completely silent. A moment later, the chief Mo god finally spoke with difficulty. What is the possibility we can hold out? 1/10. Shuei was still calm. Yoshi-Yaku sighed. While he did not care as much as the others, he still felt extremely discomfort by the feeling of helplessness due to the difference in power. What if we use everyone in the Emotion Temple? The chief Mo god suddenly gritted out a question. We have already mobilized everyone. Yoshi-Yaku unconsciously answered, but then he reacted. He was stunned at the realization. He looked at the chief Mo god with shock on his face. A hint of blood rose in the chief Mo god's face. His eyes were like twin balls of fire. No, we will conscript everyone. All the families in the Emotion Temple, every Mo that cultivates Shin power, no matter the gender, they will be on the battlefield. We can make an army that is 10, 20 times bigger than the Nether King's army. Everyone was frightened by the chief Mo god's mad suggestion. But after the war finished, the Emotion Temple's lands would be desolate. A war like that had never occurred before, not even in the wars between the Yaoma and the Shou. This was using bodies to fill the hole. Yes. Only that. We will turn the Emotion Temple into a hell. A hell that will pull the Nether King down. The chief Mo god howled at the top of his lungs. He waved his arms wildly as though his body had been flooded with fighting spirit again. Everyone became silent. If the fighting really reached a level, the fatalities would be astounding. All of the Mo would be reduced. This is only an internal conflict of the Mo, we are all Mo, Yoshi-Yaku couldn't help but say. While he came from the Emotion Temple and didn't feel anything for the Nether King, but the damage this would do to the Mo. The chief Mo god suddenly turned and glared as though his eyes would sprout fire. He shouted, "Shut up! Yoshi-Yaku, starting today, Yoshi Battalion will be led by second." Yoshi-Yaku's face turned ashen, but then uncontrolled fury flooded his face. He laughed coldly, "Ha! You have gone mad." Chief Elder's face filled with murderousness. "What? You want to kill me?" Yoshi-Yaku held his head proudly, but his gaze was icy. "Come on." Finishing, he didn't even look at the chief Mo god as he turned and left the hall. The chief Mo god's face was black and his temples throbbed. He forced himself to resist. He knew that if he attacked Yoshi-Yaku now, the Emotion Temple would split. Who else has opinions? Chief Mo god had a dark expression. The others were silent. Chief Mo god's expression eased slightly. He felt better that the other people did not resist his decision. He relaxed his tone. I know that the fatalities will be high, but this is our only chance at victory. We will have to disregard the cost. We need to let the Nether King feel that the Emotion Temple has the determination to fight to the end. The mad voice of the chief Mo god echoed in the hall. Shuei's residence. Wula drank back a few swigs of strong liquor. He seemed to be extremely thirsty. He allowed the liquor to flow down his mouth and neck. He only put down the liquor jar when a flush appeared on his face. He murmured to himself, Yoshi Yaku was right, boss has gone mad. Shui Yu had a small bottle and cup in front of him. He poured a small amount and slowly sipped it with a leisurely air. The two were both Mo gods who had been promoted after the first three, and this made them closer. I'm not one to lead troops. Wu Lu gulped another mouthful and shook his head. But I know that doing this is like drinking poison to satisfy thirst. Right now, we still have the hearts of the people. But if we conscript that time, we will lose the hearts of the people. He has too much pressure on him, Shui Yu said neutrally. No matter what, he cannot do this. Wu Lu showed his disappointment. Pity, I'm just a step away from god level. If I was strong as Wei Shang, our situation will be much better. You have done well, Shui Yu comforted. Ever since the last battle between Wu Lu and Wei Shang, Wu Lu had worked hard. He was the fifth Mo god, but he was the strongest of the Mo gods in terms of individual power. Chief Mo god had once urged Wu Lu to study to be a battle general. With such strong individual power, even if he was slightly less skilled as a battle general, he would be much stronger than most battle generals. Yet Wu Lu had no interest in becoming a battle general. His entire mind was focused on cultivation. Wu Lu took another mouthful of liquor and lamented, 10 years ago, I was defeated by Wei Shang. 10 years later, and not only have I not caught up, I am left even further behind. I can only feel admiration. This kind of man is the one we should model ourselves after. 10 years ago, everyone said Wei Shang was dead. I laughed at that. How could a man like that die so easily? Shui Yu listened silently. He knew that Wu Lu only wanted to find someone to vent to. Even Lin Qian was defeated by Wei Shang. I don't like Lin Qian, but he is a true genius. Yu, what do you think? Why is the world changing so quickly? Wu Li's eyes were blurry and filled with bewilderment. Another king suddenly popped up. He made trouble in Nether Realm, but that wasn't enough, so he came over to unite the Moha. How sorry has he made us all? Now Mo Cloud C and Kunlun are fighting. Wei Shang that wasn't been seen for 10 years is now god level and managed to frighten Lin Qian to hiding. Kunlun has lost great face. Lin Qian is really sad. They are both god level, such a great humiliation, this world, what is going on, don't understand. As Wu Lu spoke, his words became indistinct. He fell forward on his face and started to snore. He was extremely depressed and only came to Shui Yu's place to get drunk. Shui Yu sat as he slowly sipped. The harsh liquor was like fire in his throat. Flame started to burn in that pair of eyes that seemed to always be calm. He thought of the blood summons from the past, thought of his confusion in the past 10 years as he waited, thought of how he had asked himself every night, thought of many things. He seemed to speak to himself. Because a planted seed will grow into a great tree. Editor's note, https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=unj_wm1xngs. Today's was an easy one. Also, just in the case you missed it. 100 chapters for the payoff. Or is it 350 chapters? Fourth Mo God, fourth member of the Mo Gods, Battle General. He first appears in chapter 805, but not much is revealed about him. Shui Yu, Mo from the Water Moon family. First appearing in chapter 559, he receives a blood summons from Wei. He is an experienced hunter, but has lived an impoverished life. Translator ramblings, this is even more terrible when you realize that the Mo gods reached their present power levels because of worship from these people. So they aren't just planning the whole-scale massacre of their citizens, but people who actively worship them. Reminder. Below is the link to the donation page for Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. We thank you in advance if you decide to participate and donate. Feel free to write a comment under the post if you choose to donate. Link. https://imaginationlibrary.com/shop/donate/p/400653881/category =10557183. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 909, Sword God Wei Shang. Chapter 909, Sword God Wei Shang. Mu Xian's situation was terrible. She had underestimated Bi Han. Her battalion had received a high number of fatalities. She did not feel any dissatisfaction. Bi Han was stronger than she was. She accepted the losses. But when she received Xue Dong's flying sword letter, she was stunned. Sect leader had been defeated. Sect leader had been defeated? How was it possible? Mu Xian's first reaction was one of disbelief, but it was Xue Dong had sent this message. She quickly accepted that this was the truth. Mu Xian immediately realized this was an unprecedented danger. Wei Shang was fighting his way to the main peak of Kunlun. If he truly made it onto Kunlun's main peak, then a calamity would descend on Kunlun. The peerless Kunlun had never been humiliated like that before. Damn it! Mu Xian wanted to grow wings and fly back to Kunlun, yet Bihan would not let them escape. If Mu Xian showed any opening, he would take a bite. Bihan was like a wolf, cunning and ruthless. Mu Xian battalion was heavily wounded. In a short span of a few days, more than 1,000 people fell under the fangs of Bihan's Sin battalion. Worse was that a similar amount of people were injured. More off, Mu Xian knew that Bihan had deliberately left many with just injuries. Injuries had a greater impact on morale and reduced their mobility. Mu Xian battalion's morale was unprecedentedly low after 2 successive losses. Mu Xian knew that she could not beat Bihan in conditions like this. Right now, she was considering how to get back to Kunlun as fast as possible. Kunlun had been forced into a precarious predicament. The situation reversed so suddenly that even Mu Xian felt clueless. However, Bihan seemed to guess her intentions. He continued to hound and harry them with little fear of retaliation. For the first time, Mu Xian felt powerless. What should she do? Darren! Mu Xian's second-in-command interrupted her thoughts. Mu Xian raised her head. Let this subordinate take command of the rear. Her second-in-command spoke. She had a calm expression as though she was just describing a normal matter. Mu Xian's heart shook. She looked at this partner that had followed her for over a decade. The other's gaze was determined. The two had grown up together from childhood and were like sisters. For Kunlun. Her sister-in-arms tone was serious and determined. After staring for a long moment, Mu Xian suppressed the grief she felt. Closing her eyes, she used her last shred of will to say, for Kunlun. The second-in-command showed a gentle smile, turned and then left. Mu Xian's tears flowed down. The sorrowful atmosphere filled the battalion. Everyone understood the decision of the higher-ups. The 1,000 injured members and 2,000 sword show were selected to stay behind. They would use their lives to delay Bihan. The cold wind cut like a blade. For Kunlun. Wei Shang flew holding his sword. His expression was solemn. Everywhere he passed, the sky and the ground seemed to be dyed by blood. The god-killing blood sword seemed to have been filled with blood, and its killing intent filled the sky. Wei Shang's gaze was clear and determined. He could not count how many people he had killed in the past days. The sword show of Kunlun leapt fearlessly towards him like a flood. Their strength was not worth mentioning, but their resolve caused him to change expression. But it only amounted to this. Wei Shang's heart was like a stone. The sword oath he had given in the past echoed in his mind. He would not rest against Kunlun, this would only end with death. To stop him, Kunlun destroyed all the transportation formations along the way. However, this was not of any effect against Wei Shang. God-level experts could travel through the void. When the Kunlun mountain range entered his view, even Wei Shang was awed by its vastness and majesty. Mountain peaks numbering in the tens of thousands like an endless forest of swords that stretched out. Each mountain peak was like a flying sword. They had different appearances and different auras. Some were steep, others vast plateaus, others covered in glaciers, or flowing with lava. Even Wei Shang, who had been to so many places, was seeing such a unique place for the first time. As expected, Kunlun was blessed. Wei Shang lamented inside as his gaze landed on the main peak of Kunlun. The main peak of Kunlun was the most attention-catching of the tens of thousands because of its height and size. Kunlun's main peak was unrivaled as it towered over the others. All other mountains were like molehills next to it. It was much higher and wider than the other peaks. It was like an enormous sword pointing towards the firmament. Peerless Kunlun. The layers of Jinji suddenly appeared. It added a beautiful layer of silk to the main peak that flashed with dazzlingly light under the sunlight. Was this Kunlun? Wei Shang's eyes suddenly became bright. While the main peak of Kunlun had soul-shaking presence, the image in his mind was the little unknown and remote Wukong mountain. It was not vast, it did not have any astounding power, it was not revered by countless people. But that mountain was the most important mountain in his heart. In the name of Wukong. Wei Shang took a deep breath. His eyes were full of resolve as he raised the god-killing blood sword. He's here. Wei Shang. The main peak of Kunlun shifted with people. All of the mountain peaks in Kunlun's mountain range were full of people. Countless Kunlun disciples had came from all over. For Kunlun. Someone shouted. Almost everyone raised their flying sword and shouted, "For Kunlun! For Kunlun!" The thunderous shouts echoed in the air, in the mountains, in the hearts of every Kunlun disciple. Kill! Kill! Countless shadows flew up from Kunlun's mountain range to cover the sky. They were like a burning sea of flames that wanted to use the fire of their life to burn that terrifying figure. Their faces were filled with fearlessness. Yet, unexpectedly, that person in the distance did not charge over. For some unknown reason, many people sighed in relief. But at this time, Wei Sheng suddenly raised the sword in his hand. Everyone stilled. Even the Kunlun disciples that were charging towards Wei Sheng paused. What did he want to do? Wei Sheng was over 150 li away from the main peak of Kunlun. If they hadn't set up seal formation, they would not have been able to see Wei Sheng's figure. Was this a challenge? What was the use in raising the sword from so far away? Yet before they could understand, a red sword energy flew out of Wei Sheng's sword. That red sword energy was not blinding and did not look as though it was astounding in any aspect. But that seemingly ordinary energy cut the space in front of them as though it traveled through the void. The sword energy brought with it an endless ocean of blood. The surging waves of blood rose up like monsters opening their mouths and leaping at them. These Kunlun disciples were swallowed by the surging waves of blood before they could react. The waves of blood did not stop. They became even stronger and charged towards the main peak at an even faster speed. The vast distance did not seem to matter. Almost instantly, the surging blood-red waves carrying savage power and steel resolve smashed onto the main peak of Kunlun. Boom! The Jinji of the main peak was like paper. Shattered energies of various colors flew through the air and then were consumed by the bloody waves. The layers of Jinji that Kunlun had worked to set up over the generations didn't even last for a breath before turning into dust. The waves that crushed all obstruction slammed into the main peak of Kunlun. Boom! Time seemed to stop in this moment. Everyone's expressions were dazed. Their minds having gone completely blank. The vast Kunlun main peak slowly collapsed before their eyes. Boom boom boom! The main peak was so large that when it fell, shattered stone and dust rose up into an enormous mushroom cloud. The roar caused all of Kunlun mountain range to shudder. A deathly silence. It was completely silent. Everyone had ashen faces. Their lips trembled. Their expressions were dazed. The main peak had been cut down in one stroke. All of the Kunlun disciples had pale faces. Something seemed to collapse in their minds. The grieving screams contained the deepest of hopelessness. Wei Sheng had charged into Kunlun and cut down Kunlun's mountain peak, but this astounding news swept the world like a gust of wind. Nothing was more astounding than this. Kunlun, the strongest hegemon of the world, had been defeated by one person. Wei Sheng had struck down the main peak of Kunlun. Everyone that heard the news would be dazed for a while. People already felt that Lin Qian's defeat was incomprehensible. This event could not be described. Kunlun had been the strongest sect of the world for thousands of years, the strongest faction in the world. No sect could match Kunlun. Peerless Kunlun. Kunlun had not coined the phrase. The authority that Kunlun had accumulated over thousands of years was imprinted on people's minds. The disciples of Kunlun were always proud. Everyone thought they deserved to be proud. This was a pride that was matter of fact because they came from Kunlun. They were always full of spirit and confidence. They were forever the most outstanding youths, the strongest sword xiu. They were the future rulers of the world both in the eyes of others, and they believed this in their hearts. Kunlun was the holy ground of sword xiu. They created the cultivation path for the powerful sword xiu and developed it. The sword xiu became the strongest offensive fighters of all the xiuxia. Yet this holy land for sword xiu was brought to its knees by a sword xiu from a previously unknown sect. For any sect, this wasn't just a great humiliation, it wounded them at their foundation. When a sword xiu heard the news, they could not speak. In their hearts, something seemed to silently collapse in their minds. Kunlun would never be the peerless Kunlun ever again. The collapsed main peak in Kunlun's peerless reputation became the perfect adornment for one person. There would be no argument in the future about the name of the sword god Wei Sheng. Peerless sword god. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 910, Lin Qian's Sword. Chapter 910, Lin Qian's Sword. Wei Sheng cutting the main peak of Kunlun was so astounding at the news that Emotion Temple had surrendered to the Nether King paled in comparison. However, the Mo were an exception. the eyes of all Mo were on the army of the Nether King army in Hundred Savage Realm. The enmity the Mo of Hundred Savage Realm felt towards the Nether King had been diminished greatly. The power of Wei Shang's campaign against Coenluan caused the Mo to reconsider the status of a god-level expert. Even an existence as strong as Coenluan was forced to such desperate straits by Wei Shang. God level, that is the true peak of this world. A faction that did not a god level would be fated to be undefeated. Among the Mo, there was only one god level, the Nether King. This caused the enmity from many of the Mo to fade, and instead they felt slightly reassured. The Mo had their own god level. Many people started to hope for the arrival of peace. The Nether King was undoubtedly the one most qualified to unite the Mo. The Emotion Temple's inner conflict and the subsequent coup was supposedly due to the chief Mo god's decision to conscript and sacrifice the populace. Not many were too surprised by this. In the eyes of many people, the Emotion Temple was already hard-pressed to have held until now under such great pressure. After the initial shock, all of the Mo entered celebration. The Mo were united. After thousands of years, the Mo finally been reunited. In the history of the Mo, every time the Mo were united, that was the beginning of a golden age of prosperity. They had enough reason to believe that the Mo were going to welcome a completely new future. The king of Mo. The chief Mo god was killed. The rhinoceros Mo god was not willing to continue in the new regime. He left the Emotion Temple and returned to his homeland to be the clan leader. The Emotion Temple still had the Yoshi Battalion and Shu Weiyu Battalion. Wu Lu became the new bodyguard for the king. The other management positions were appointed by the new king. The top 4 battalions of the Mo quickly took form. Liang Wei's King's Horn became the first of the Mo battalions. The other 3 battalions were Shi Wei's Qi Battalion, Yoshiyaka's Yoshi Battalion, and Shu Weiyu Battalion. And Mo was deputized as the first Mo commander in command. The only unexpected appointment was Zhu Nanyu. She became the first advisor to Mo's strategic group. Due to Zuo Mo having already built up the framework with Princess Xia and the Lan brothers, everything progressed smoothly. Mushi Darren, your residence has been arranged. Please follow me. A male shadow guard dressed in black respectfully bowed and then led the way at the front. Please. Mushi nodded and followed behind with her guards. You are too polite. This shadow guard respectfully answered. The guards around Musu had unnatural and cautious expressions. These veterans of the battlefield and in death felt uneasy in front of these shadow guards. The Shadow Guard was an extremely powerful organization and was Ming Yi Darren's the most trusted and sharpest blade. These 2 years were better. In the years before that, it was these people hidden in the shadows that had brought down and assassinated Ming Yi Darren's enemies. In this unprecedented purge of the Yao ranks, the one that had been the most effective was the Shadow Guard. Mushi noticed the uneasiness of her guards. She didn't like the Shadow Guard either, but she didn't want to offend them. The Shadow Guard wasn't just the strongest intelligence network, they were also Ming Yi Darren's most trusted protectors. Their leader, Yu Qinlai, was also very trusted by Ming Yi Darren. Battle generals innately disliked these assassins hidden in the darkness. People had more than once expressed concerns about the Shadow Guard's accumulated power. The only thing to rejoice about was that Yu Qinlai never entered any power struggles and maintained respect towards the other Darren. However, people were still worried about Yu Qinlai's cruel actions. Mushi refocused and asked, has Bin Lan Darren arrived? Bin Lan Darren arrived yesterday night. Mushi knew why Darren had summoned them all back for. The changes in the world affairs had been too drastic in this recent while. Coenluan and Mo Cloud Sea had started their war, Lin Xian had lost, the main peak of Coenluan had been cut down, and Coenluan had entered unprecedented danger. Mushi and the others were astounded. They knew just how powerful Coenluan was. But before one wave settled, another started. The Emotion Temple suddenly had internal conflict and 3 remaining Mo gods surrendered to the Nether King. The Mo had united. This caused the Yao to suddenly feel great danger. No one would doubt the strength of a united Mo race. Each time the Mo were united, it was when they were strongest, and also when their desire to expand was greatest. The 2 titans of the Xiuzha world were fighting intensely. That Nether King wasn't stupid and he wouldn't participate. The Mo only had one direction to expand in. The Yao lands. In the past thousands of years, the Yaoma had maintained a good relationship. Usually, the Yao did not need to worry about the fractionalized Mo. However, now, the Mo had a new king. This Mo king was of mysterious and unknown origins. However, his intentions were revealed immediately after he ascended to the throne. He led a powerful invasion of Hundred Savage Realm and rapidly united the Mo. The strong expansionist stance that the new Mo king displayed worried the Yao. Mu Shi was not stupid. The Yao and the Mo were on good relations because the Yao Ma had the same enemies. But right now that the Xiuzha were fighting among themselves, and the Mo were strong while the Yao weak. Would the Mo overlook this opportunity to swallow the Yao? Mu Shi was also filled with worries. The meeting was of the highest levels. Almost all the higher-ups of the Yao were gathered together. The Yao were in a nervous atmosphere. This meeting would decide the fate of the Yao. Bihan looked at the thick smoke above the burning city and turned to lead Xin battalion to leave without any hesitation. This was the 9th major hub city that he had raised. Other than the battalions on the borders of Kowloon that didn't dare to move, almost all the other battalions in Kowloon had returned to reinforce the main peak of Kowloon. Lin Xian was not present, Shuidong was not here, all of Kowloon was in chaos. They could only respond based on their instincts. But how could the weakly supported border hold against Gongsun Cha, Bihan, and Yang Yuan Hao? The 3 battalions broke through with little effort. The vast and empty Kowloon was spread in front of them. Gongsun Cha and the others did not choose to conquer the territory. Kowloon's rule in these lands was deeply entrenched over thousands of years. The factions of various sizes here were fighting back, and once Mo Cloud C tried to conquer these places, Mo Cloud C's battalions would be tangled up in intensifying rebellions. Therefore, the strategy Gongsun Cha and the others planned was simple and brutal. Damage, constant damage to Kowloon's production capabilities and infrastructure. Everywhere they passed, they didn't conquer, they destroyed. This kind of destruction would not be immediately fatal for Kowloon, but it was akin 1,000 wounds on Kowloon's enormous body. The bleeding would continue and Kowloon would only become weaker with time. Following behind the 3 top battalions were the first-class battalions like Ma Fan and Tang Fei. Gongsun Sha knew that a chance like this would not occur again. He did not keep anything back. All of the first-class battalions and elite battalions were mobilized. They followed the 3 top battalions to enter the vast core of Kowloon. Time. What was most important was time. Gongsun Sha commanded that all battalions had to leave Kowloon within 10 days. The Jinji forts were being built day and night on the borders of Mo Cloud Sea. Kowloon, who had suffered so much loss, was very likely to retaliate. In these weeks, Kowloon's sky was covered in smoke. The sect leader had been defeated, the main peak cut down, countless cities burned to ashes. Kowloon seemed to reach the end of the road in the span of one night. By the time the people of Kowloon reacted, Mo Cloud C's battalions had disappeared. Seeing Kowloon covered in wounds, everyone cried. Lin Xian wanted to die. Kowloon was wailing after being trampled under the hooves of Mo Cloud C. Kowloon had fallen under Wei Shang's sword. But at this time, he could not come out, he could not fight for his beloved Kowloon, he could only stay in this hidden cavern and heal. Lin Xian held the immemorial sword tightly. His handsome face was unusually pale. In just a few dozen days, he had thinned by a size. His bloodless lips moved, tears flowed out of his empty eyes and fell down his face. Master, sorry. Sorry. All of his pride had been completely destroyed. Kowloon was his all, he lived for Kowloon, he would forever live for Kowloon. If he hadn't been defeated, the state of affairs would not be so bad, the main peak would not have been destroyed, Kowloon would not have lost so, and Kowloon would not have been humiliated. I am a criminal. The criminal of Kowloon. He said to himself as though he was proclaiming judgment on himself. He stood up. A light suddenly appeared in his empty eyes. The light grew brighter and filled his eyes. His wooden head slowly started to turn. He sat silently. The excitement and madness in his eyes slowly grew. An indescribable determination was in his eyes and flowed in his body. The immemorial Shen sword in his hand hummed and he felt an indescribable understanding. His sword was Kowloon. Not for heaven or earth, not for the laws, not for the people, only for Kowloon. This body belonged to Kowloon, this sword belonged to Kowloon, but all the laws of the world were below Kowloon, all the emotions of the world were below Kowloon. This was his sword, Kowloon above all. The energies in Lin Xian's body suddenly flowed and circulated. Half of his injuries healed. His sword essence level had once again made another advancement. In the fight with Wei Shang that day, Wei Shang had found his sword path. Today, Lin Xian also found the sword path for him. Kowloon had reached its most precarious moment. Lin Xian did not feel any joy. At this time, his level of sword essence was just matched to Wei Shang. His wounds had not healed, and he was still at a disadvantage. But he did not continue to spend time recovering. Kowloon had reached the edge of a precipice. He must lead. He was also below Kowloon. Editor's note, FYI, explicit. Below is the link to the donation page for Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. We thank you in advance if you decide to participate and donate. Feel free to write a comment under the post if you choose to donate. Link: https://imaginationlibrary.com/shop/number/x/p/4006531/category =10557183. Translator Ramblings, 5 more to go. Lin Xian's epiphany really highlights the difference between him and Wei Shang. This is a kind of zeal that I can almost admire. Both Lin Xian and Wei Shang put their beliefs at the core of their life, but for Lin Xian, he can sacrifice anything and anyone for his beliefs. On the other hand, Wei Shang put his friends and close people as first in his belief as a result of his conviction to protect. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 911, Lin Xian's Counterattack. Chapter 911, Lin Xian's Counterattack. Wei Shang gazed at Kunlun behind him and then turned around without looking back. Gongsun Cha, Bihan, and Yang Yuan Hao had met up. The 3 top battalions were the top fighting force of Mo Cloud C. He needed to hurry back to prevent Lin Xian from targeting them. That loss would be too great. While there was no news of a new god level appearing in Kunlun's ranks, Wei Shang did not dare to be careless. These 3 top battle generals were the foundation of Mo Cloud C. Gu Liangdao being killed by Lin Xian taught everyone the partnership of top battle general and god level was the best strategy right now. The god level was unstoppable and could create chaos in an army as well as kill the leader. However, they could not take over and hold an entire region with only their power. A battalion must come in and then consolidate their control. And if a top battle general didn't have the protection of a god level, they would become choice targets for the enemy god level. Right now, the 3 battle generals were together. Wei Shang didn't dare to be careless. He had to be the one in charge of protecting them. Wei Shang also knew that he could not eliminate all of Kunlun by himself. An enormous being like this had such resilience and vitality that normal people couldn't imagine. When Lin Xian looked at the remnants of Kunlun's main peak, his tears flowed down. His face was pale, he was soulless as he allowed the tears to flow. He was like a stump of wood that did not move for a long time. Nothing could describe the pain he felt at this time. From a very young age, protecting Kunlun was his dream. He had grown up, but this goal had never changed. The sacrifices of the elders, master sending his soul into the sword, they all caused his belief to deepen. Ever since he took control of Kunlun from his master, he did all he could and didn't dare to slack off. Yet, in his hands, Kunlun had endured unprecedented humiliation. Even the main peak of Kunlun had been cut down. He looked around. What he saw was the wooden and sorrowful gazes of the disciples and heard their cries. Lin Xian felt as though there was a knife stabbing his heart. Shuidong, Mu Xian, and the others that hurried backside in relief as they saw Lin Xian. All of the higher-ups of Kunlun gathered for the first time after their defeat. All of their faces were filled with fury and sorrow. Their gazes all looked towards Lin Xian. This man that had led them to victory again and again. Their eyes had not lost hope. As long as this man was still alive, they had not lost their hope of victory. All of Kunlun was looking at their leader, their banner. In the history of Kunlun, we have never been humiliated like this. Lin Xian's deep voice was filled with sorrow. It passed through the sound tablets to every corner of Kunlun. This my mistake, my responsibility. After this war, regardless of the result, I will abdicate the position of sect leader, but... Exclamations of disbelief echoed in every corner of Kunlun. Their eyes were wide and filled with shock. Shuidong, Mu Xian, and the others changed expression. Lin Xian had not discussed this decision with them. A failure like myself does not qualify to be the sect leader of Kunlun. Everyone could hear the guilt in Lin Xian's voice. Many people's eyes turned red. Kunlun's main peak had been cut down. Many people had felt some anger towards Lin Xian. But no one blamed him right now. This was a man that placed Kunlun's well-being above his own life. Who would bear to blame him? But before that, I still have a battle to finish. No, we still have an unfinished battle. In the history of Kunlun, there has never been a humiliation like this. This is Kunlun's humiliation, it is our humiliation. Only the sword, blood, and victory can wash away this humiliation. Disciples of Kunlun, people of Kunlun, this is our home, this place with our kin. But now, we have been humiliated, our kin massacred, our homes burned. Our Kunlun has reached a precarious time. We have no place to flee, we have nowhere to retreat, we will not be spared. Please of Coenluan, draw your swords. For the glory of Coenluan, for our kin, for our homes. As Coenluan's sect leader, I am ordering complete conscription of all able-bodied warriors of Coenluan. No matter the gender, no matter the age, anyone above mortal rank is conscripted. All businesses regardless of size are restricted from selling any merchandise. All resources will be directed towards the army. All battalions, gather and wait for orders. I, Lin Qian, will lead you on the battlefield. In the name of Coenluan, victory or death. In the name of Coenluan, we march to our final battle. Battle to the end. Listening to Lin Qian's decisive voice in the sound tablet, the entire tent was silent. Everyone had extremely ugly expressions. No one had thought that Coenluan's counterattack, no, Lin Qian's counterattack would be so decisive and reckless. Even Gongsun Cha hadn't expected Lin Qian's move. He was like a gambler that had lost greatly, and went all in on the next hand. The advantage that Gongsun Cha and the others had accumulated had immediately vanished. Shen power had developed for 10 years, how many of Coenluan's sword show had reached mortal level? No one knew, but everyone knew that this number would be enormous. Nether King's 500,000 elite astounded the world, but when the enormous being that was Coenluan sent out all of their members, their potential was something that even Gongsun Cha and the others didn't dare to imagine. Coenluan's battalions were astounding in scale to being with. They had large territories and each of them required battalions stationed there. Lin Qian's conscription order didn't just apply to the battalions, but also to the citizenry. They could easily create an army of over 1 million people. Gongsun Cha and the others would not be surprised if they could gather 2 million people. Even if these people were not trained, even if these people didn't even have the training of the lowest ranked battalions, this was still a terror-inducing number of people. No one had ever done this before. With his back to the wall, Lin Qian had completely messed up Mo Cloudsea's plans. Mo Cloudsea's Jinji forts that they had rushed to build were meaningless in front of such overwhelming numbers. He is a madman. Someone said this. Everyone felt agreement. Such an action disregarded all consequences. Even if Coenluan won, they would be greatly wounded, taking years if not decades to recover. But everyone had to admit that Lin Qian's move was extremely skilled. Mo Cloudsea's battalions had poked countless holes in Coenluan's territory. Coenluan had suffered great losses. Their plan had been to drag out the fighting, and as time went on, Coenluan would grow weaker. By that time, they wouldn't even have the ability to fight back. Lin Qian decided to take out all of his assets and rush their final battle. At this time, Coenluan had just suffered a great loss and were like a group of grieving soldiers. Lin Qian displayed his zealous attitude. Victory or death. The power that they could muster would be great. Those heroic tales of victory by angry and grieving soldiers were of this situation. How about we hold out? If we can hold for long enough, their morale would be blunted and their untrained conscripts would collapse. Yang Yuan glanced at Gongsun Cha. We cannot hold. Gongsun Cha shook his head, his expression solemn. None of our defense lines can hold. Yang Yuan did not feel surprised. Truthfully, even he didn't believe there would be a defense line like that. Mo Cloudsea had always relied on elite soldiers. They didn't have many battalions, but their training and equipment were all of the highest quality. There was no problem with this strategy usually, but in front of Lin Qian's overwhelming numbers, they immediately became lacking. How about we circle to Coenluan's rear? Coenluan's rear is completely undefended. Tang Fei frowned as she thought hard. Lin Qian is coming at us with everything. Attack the rear? He doesn't care if the rear is destroyed, Gongsun Cha refused. How about Teacher Wei, Ma Fan said with a snicker. Everyone turned to look at Wei Shang. Wei Shang said honestly, Lin Qian and I are evenly matched. The reason that I was able to win last time was mostly due to Gu Liangdao and Shuang Yu injuring Lin Qian before they died. Lin Qian was wounded and I had an epiphany. But I hear from his voice that he seemed to also have a breakthrough. If I attack, he will have the advantage of territory. Meaning he will likely have the help of a few pseudo-god level, and he would have the upper hand. We also have pseudo-god level, Ma Fan muttered. Mo Cloudsea had more pseudo-god level than Coenluan. People heard this and their eyes went bright. Pseudo-god level cannot travel through the void, Wei Shang explained. People finally reacted. Yes, god level could enter the places no one could, by traveling through the void, but pseudo-god level couldn't. People looked at each other with ugly expressions. When Zuo Mo saw the message that Mo Cloudsea passed over, he was given a fright. He hadn't thought that Lin Qian would do the same thing as the chief Mo god. But he had to admit the strength of this move. Compared to Lin Qian, the chief Mo god was lacking. When Lin Xian did this, and there were no objecting voices in Kowloon. All of Kowloon were with him and gambling on this battle. When Chief Mo God tried this, there were many voices within the Emotion Temple that objected. Even if Shuiyu didn't do anything, the Chief Mo God wouldn't have had an easy time. Even though Zuo Mo had seen so many powerful opponents, no one was stronger than Lin Xian. This person was top in both strength and skill, and he almost had no weaknesses. It was troublesome now. Once a final battle like this was started, the weakness of Mo Cloud C's shallow foundation was exposed. If this was the Mo Cloud C of the past, Zuo Mo would have also dared to give a conscription order like this. While Mo Cloud C had expanded greatly now, the composition was more complex, and they were not united. This was related to Zuo Mo being missing for 10 years. If they didn't have enough unity, playing a card like this was akin to burning oneself with fire. In other worlds, Lin Xian could afford to do this, he couldn't. But Zuo Mo's plans had also reached a crucial time. If this side wasn't resolved, he didn't dare to announce his identity as Nether King. Time once again became the deciding factor in victory and defeat. Zuo Mo fought for a night before sending his conclusion back to Mo Cloud C. Zuo Mo's order was very simple. One word, delay, use all methods to delay the enemy. To delay the final battle. Editor's note, throwback to way back. This was my introduction to jazz. If you find any errors, ads pop-up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 912, Yu Qin lies 10 years of preparation. Chapter 912, Yu Qin lies 10 years of preparation. The top brass of the Yao races were fighting intensely. Lin Xian's counterattack had shocked the Yao. Thinking about an ocean of several 100,000 people flooding over caused everyone to feel powerless. Except for fighting back using the same method, no one had any other solution. In the final battle between Kowloon and Mo Cloud C, the Yao favored Kowloon. Kowloon's great unity was of great effect here. The consequences of Zuo Mo having gone missing for 10 years usually couldn't be seen, but no one could avoid it at this time. And the Mo, the former natural allies of the Yao. They were pressuring the Yao at this time. The intense arguments filled the meeting room. Ming Yuyi sat at the head of the room, her eyes closed as though she was resting. Feng Xinz and Yu Qin Lai were standing to her left and right. The Yao were on the weaker side. Even worse was that they did not have a god-level expert. Mu Shi and Bing Lan could not solve this problem. At this present stage, a god level was undefeatable. Suddenly, a voice spoke over everyone without any warning. Everyone, please do not waste any more time. The voice was not loud, but it could be heard over the entire room. All of the arguments and conversations were cut off. The one who spoke was an unfamiliar male. The male was wearing a copper mask. Who are you? Why do I not recognize you? An elder's face changed slightly. He glared angrily and shouted, "Who are you? You dare to sneak in?" The mask-wearing male completely dismissed the elder's scolding. He stood up elegantly and bowed towards the crowd. He said softly, "Good day everyone, I am Nether King." The room was completely silent. Everyone was stunned by the words. No one spoke. Oh, that's not right. The mask-wearing male laughed softly and said, "I am the Mo King now." Zuo Mo's unfathomable presence descended on the meeting room like that of a god. Everyone felt as though they were gripped by an invisible hand. The strong feeling of suffocation caused their minds to turn blank. Feng Xinz suddenly gave off strong light as Shin power surged inside his body. He didn't know how the Nether King had gotten into the meeting. But the compound was surrounded by experts. If they made a disturbance, the guards outside would flood in. Yet a cold gaze penetrated his defense like an arrow. His Shin power froze. Not good. Feng Xinz's expression changed dramatically. Was this the power of god level? Feng Xinz was the strongest expert under Ming Yuye's command. As a pseudo-god level, he had few equals. However, just a gaze from the other had. Terror overcame his mind. He had thought he understood the strength of god level, but the difference in was greater than he had predicted. This was a gap that could not be crossed. Feng Xinz sank into a short daze. He did not notice a blurry figure appear behind his back. A purple light flashed. Feng Xinz finally seemed to wake up. The strong feeling of danger made him turn into a berserk beast. At this time, he felt the restraints around him tighten. He was unable to struggle. In his wide eyes, that terrifying person wearing the mask moved to grab at him. God level. This was the last words in his mind. How could a pseudo-god level have the chance to fight back against a god level and a pseudo-god level expert? Killed in one attack. Feng Xinzi's head flew up, the blood spraying onto the ceiling and dyeing it red. Screams sounded inside the meeting room. The face of many elders went pale. They were frightened by this bloody scene. However, the sound in the meeting room was blocked off from the outside. The room was designed so people outside couldn't hear the conversations inside. Even Feng Xinz had been killed in one move. The people who had wanted to attack shuddered. Even Feng Xinz Darren. Ming Yuye's gaze turned to Yu Qinli and turned icy. Good. Very good. Yu Qinli. You dare to collude with the Nether King. Ming Yuyi was not stupid. Yu Qinli had been in charge of security for the entire venue. Only Yu Qinli had the ability to sneak a person inside so easily. Yu Qinli bowed respectfully. I am doing this for everyone's good. The people present had ashen faces. They knew the power that Yu Qinli held. The betrayal of such an important person meant that the enemy had already set up plans to deal with them. Ming Yuyi did not pay attention to Yu Qinli. She turned and said coldly, Nether King is really skilled, such scheming. Zuo Mo smiled. Inside, he was completely won over by Pu Yao and Wei's planning. Zuo Mo hadn't thought much of Pu Yao and Wei's plan all those years ago when they had told him about the blood summons and the seeds. Yet what he hadn't expected was that all three seeds had been of monumental importance. If Yu Qinli hadn't guided him, he would not be able to find Ming Yuyi if he came here. Zuo Mo found a place to sit as though he was the host here. Alright, everyone, I believe I don't need to say any harsh words. Let us now discuss the future of the Yao. Zuo Mo's words easily passed into everyone's ears. Do not be delusional. Ming Yuye's face was frosted over and her tone unusually determined. Even if everyone dies here today, we will not pass your decisions. If you want to conquer the Yao, send your army. Ming Yuye's words aroused many people's agreement. They glared with fury at Zuo Mo. Yes. If you want to conquer the Yao, send your army. Humph, you want to use conspiracies that cannot be seen in public to take down the Yao, naive. Zuo Mo looked with surprise at Ming Yuyi. He was not shocked at Ming Yuye's determination but the other's insight. Under such detrimental conditions, she was able to clearly see his intentions. It could be said that she originally had no chips in her hand but she had found some chips. While they were not many, there was some to bargain with. She determined that Zuo Mo wanted to quickly and peacefully take care of the Yao. Otherwise, he could just kill the people here, and then the army could invade. That would be the easiest method. The loss of these leads would leave the Yao in chaos, preventing a coordinated resistance against the Mo army. Zuo Mo did not do that. Ming Yuyi immediately realized the crux. Light laughter came behind the mask. If he got pressured in such advantageous conditions, then Zuo Mo was not the scalping zombie. Snap, Zuo Mo snapped his fingers and motioned to Yu Qinli. Yu Qinli understood and stepped forward. He looked calmly at Mu 11. Mushi suddenly had a bad feeling. Mushi Darren, the development of the Palace Lakewood clan is praiseworthy. However, under the prosperous appearance, there are always some fatal dangers. We have investigated all the youths of Palace Lakewood clan under the age of 30. There are only 25 that have reached Silver Battle General rank. The Drymark Yu clan and the Milesi Xian clan have more than 4 youths that are almost Gold Battle Generals. If Mu Shi Darren is not present. Yu Qinli did not continue and Mu Shi's expression already changed. She hadn't thought that Yu Qinli had been investigating the Palace Lakewood clan in secret. Under the outward prosperity of the Palace Lakewood clan was a hidden weakness. The Drymark Yu clan and the Milesi Xian clan were the archenemies of the Palace Lakewood clan. In these past years, due to Mushi's status, these two clans had been suppressed and constantly weakened. If she died. She knew if Yu Qinli just curled his pinky, the two clans would not hesitate to swear loyalty. The fate of the Palace Lakewood clan could be imagined. Bing Lan Darren. Yu Qinli bowed respectfully to Bing Lan as usual. Bing Lan smiled coldly. What? I want to hear how you will deal with me. Bing Lan had been an orphan from childhood and did not have the burden of a clan. Bing Lan Darren is not burdened by a clan. In other words, other than your own value as a battle general, Bing Lan Darren's other value is insignificant. Yu Qinli said easily, as to Bing Lan Darren's corps, you have 12 corps commanders that have the same backgrounds as Darren. Of the 12, 9 of them have married. Their husbands, the clan leaders of the 9 families, are currently guests of the Shadow Guard. Bing Lan Darren, do not worry, we will take good care of them. Bing Lan's expression finally changed. If she was not present, the fate of the core. Yu Lai's gaze did not stop at Bing Lan. He turned his face and his gaze landed on an elder that was looking on calmly. Elder Su is the one in the best situation of all the families. Elder Su has managed his clan well, the clan is united, there are no enemies in the surroundings. You have battalions, and they are also exceptional. Elder Su narrowed his eyes and couldn't help but feel slight pride. What Yu Lai said what he was most proud of. He was a person with power in the Council of Elders and his reputation was just below Bing Lan, Mushi and the others. Pity. Yu Lai suddenly shook his head and sighed. In the past, Elder Su schemed against the 10,000-mile gang, and had almost destroyed them. The 10,000-mile gang still alive and still remember Elder Su's generosity. The words 10,000-mile gang caused all the elders to change expression. They had heard of this organization before. The 10,000-mile gang had been vicious and stealthy in their actions. They had ruled with terror. Several decades ago, the 10,000-mile gang suddenly disappeared. No one had thought that Elder Su was connected to the mysterious organization. Elder Su, who had been calm from the start, suddenly stood up as though his behind was on fire. He exclaimed in shock, "Impossible." Yu Lai smiled at him. "Elder Su, do not be in a hurry. We can discuss this in detail later." Then he dismissed Elder Su. He went on discussing secret after secret as he made his way around the room. Yu Lai recited the information and secrets of almost everyone present as though it was his own. Suffocating terror and hopelessness spread through the meeting room. Mingyu's eyes were wide, and her face was white. She looked in disbelief at Yu Lai. Such detailed information, such careful preparation. She didn't know how long this had been planned. This was not possible without years of investigation. She had not known at all. She had thought that Yu Lai had betrayed her to the Nether King. Now, an even more absurd speculation uncontrollably appeared in her mind. Yu Lai was a spy of the Nether King. Her heart continued to sink. Yu Lai's move was vicious. These Yao that held power would fall. These people, and the families behind them, were the true core of the Yao, and were the true ruling class of the Yao. All of her chips disappeared. Translator ramblings, all of Pu Yao and Wei seeds are such big trees. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 913, Response. Chapter 913, Response. The change in power among the higher levels of the Yao proceeded in secret. Yu Lai's plan spanned far and wide, catching almost all of the Yao higher ranks by surprise. The timing he chose was also perfect. Because the meeting was so important, few were absent. The topic of the meeting became establishing a new council of elders. The higher ranks realized that this was a shuffling of the positions and the discussion and political maneuvering was intense. Soon, new leadership came into the public's view. Mingyu, Bing Lan and Mu Shi kept their original positions. The meeting this time did not cause any unrest among the people. Yu Lai, who had ruled the underworld, knew how to attack the weaknesses of people, and after 10 years of preparation he struck. In one hand the stick and the other the carrot, the prestigious families of the Yao were tamed. And the rebellious families were eliminated overnight and did not have a chance to cause a disturbance. Yu Lai was vicious and cruel in carrying out his duties. Everyone who knew were frightened. Fighting between families existed everywhere, but compared to the Shadow Guard uprooting an entire family until not a stalk of grass was left, their tactics were like children fighting over candy. They shuddered in fear. The new Council of Elders became the top power structure in the Yao. Bing Lan and Mu Shi were alone in the courtyard. The Shadow Guard did not make things difficult for the two. They retained their freedom, even their status and position hadn't changed. The two felt as though they had just had a dream. The two were very intelligent people. They knew that the Nether King had no fear that they would rebel. All of the higher-ups, the prestigious families of the Yao, had submitted. Even if Mingyu rose up and called for an insurrection, there was no use. The ruling caste of the Yao were useless meatbags. The two sat in silence for a long time. The air was heavy. "We are finished." Bing Lan's voice was hoarse and her eyes showed great pain. As a battle general, she instinctively disliked people like the Shadow Guard that worked in secrecy. But she hadn't thought that she would be defeated so easily by people like them. But no one cares. Bing Lan laughed mockingly. Everyone is cheering that they do not need to fight the Mo. Once the new Council of Elders took power, they announced an eternal alliance with the Mo. Both sides promised that they would be forever brothers in arms and would stand on the same side against enemies. Also, the Council of Elders was promoting more communication for the Yama alliance. The Yao and Mo realms would construct large numbers of transportation formations to increase interrelations between the two races. Once the news came out, all of the Yao cheered and celebrated. When the Mo had first finished uniting, the Yao had felt threatened. They had all been worried about the Mo invading. The two sides forming the Yao Mo alliance meant that the Mo wouldn't invade. A rock in people's hearts landed. The alliance of Yao Mo was not a novel concept. The Yao Mo were close to begin with due to a long history of fighting together against the Xiuzhi. An alliance was not much different. Unlike with the Xiuzhi, there hadn't been much hatred between the Yao and the Mo in history. This caused Bing Lan to find it incredibly ironic. The Nether King was silently taking control of the Yao. She was sure that in a few years, the Yao would be completely in the Nether King's grasp. But she could only watch as it happened and couldn't do anything. She had long since learned a truth about people: people didn't care who ruled them. They only cared if they would have peace. The elders of the prestigious families didn't care who ruled them. They only cared who gave them benefits and could make them feel fear. All the core commanders of the Yao were the representatives of the prestigious elders. Each of them had their families behind them. As long as Nether King held the Palace Lakewood clan hostage, Mushi could only bow and listen. Each member of a prestigious families was brainwashed with their responsibility to the clan from birth. They would forever place the good of their families ahead of everything else. The once truly loyal to Ming Yuyi had no chance to struggle under Yu Qinlai's knife. Even Bing Lan had no room to struggle unless she didn't care at all about the lives of her subordinates. If she did anything, then the sisters who had followed her for many years wouldn't be spared. This was Yu Qinlai's style. "I'm planning to retire as corps commander," Bing Lan said coolly. Mushi suddenly raised her head. Bing Lan waved her hand in motion for Mushi to not persuade her. She smiled as though she had been relieved of a burden. Actually, this result isn't bad. In terms of breadth of mind and skill, the Nether King will be a good king. After the Yao Mo alliance is formed, he will not treat the Yao unfairly. And once the alliance forms, it will be undefeatable. She turned around and looked at Mushi. She said solemnly, "You need to uphold the banner of the Yao. If I am not wrong, the Nether King will definitely create an alliance council of elders to be managed by the elders of the Yao Mo. Among the Yao, you are the only top battle general, your responsibility is heavy. But where is Darren planning to go?" Mushi looked at this elder who had promoted her and felt great sorrow. "I'm planning to start a battle general house." Bing Lan sighed. "We Yao have too few outstanding battle generals. No matter what the fate of the Yao will be, young talents that can prop up the sky are the true future of the Yao." Mushi said without hesitation. "I will take care of the funds." Mushi knew that Bing Lan Darren had no family to support her. She had limited resources. Bing Lan smiled. "No need, the Nether King will not be frugal on this. The king already thinks of this place as his and the people here as his people." As Bing Lan had expected, Zuo Mo was not frugal at all. Zuo Mo did not hesitate to give enormous resources to Bing Lan and Green lit the way. Bing Lan was truly the titan of the Yao battle generals. No one could compare to her experience. When she became the principal of an art house, the Battle General House created a great impact before it was even built. Bing Lan Battle General House would shine with great light in the next 1,000 years. It would be one of the two most famous battle general houses of the Yao. The other battle general house was called Pu Pu's Home for Battle Generals. These two battle general houses trained countless famed generals for the Yao in the next 1,000 years. From every angle, Zuo Mo's efficiency was astounding. But for Gongsun Cha and the others, they still found it hard. It was apt to describe it as though they were passing through each day as a year. All of Kunlun seemed to be mad as they increased their forces on the borders without regard for the cost. In front of this vast ocean, the power of an individual battalion was insignificant. The shadows of the crowds blackened the land like a slow and unstoppable wave. People gazed at it. A strong feeling of powerlessness filled their minds. The vast ocean was still growing. Mo Cloud Sea continued using guerrilla warfare to slow the enemy. They had good results, but compared to the speed that the other side was gaining as time went on, the results were negligible. Kunlun did not seem to notice their harassment. Increase. Continue increasing. Gongsun Cha and the others didn't dare to charge into the core of Kunlun's forces. Even though the people were untrained, they didn't dare. If they stepped in, they might not even have a chance to escape. The other side had gathered more than 1,200,000 people. What do we do? The situation was growing worse by the day. People did not doubt that if the attack came, they could only flee for their lives. We retreat. Gongsun Cha's eyes were bloodshot. The bashful smile on his face had disappeared and was replaced with a sharp coldness. Bi Han and Yang Yuan Hao were not much better. Ever since Cohen Luan's battalions appeared on the borders, they hadn't slept. Retreat? Everyone stilled. The decision that the three top battle generals had thought of after not resting for several days and nights was to retreat? Yang Yuan Hao explained. We cannot stop them. If they break through our defensive line, then their morale will grow and while ours would worsen. Rather than letting that happen, we should retreat of our own accord. People started to think. Gong Sun Cha explained. Cohen Luan's army is so large that supplies will be a problem. We will retreat and give up the space, but scorch the earth, stain the other's supply line. On one hand, we can blunt their morale, and the other is that their supply lines will be exposed. The people present were all experts in war. Their eyes lit up and they started a heated discussion. We will destroy all the transportation formations, everyone, force them to go through the Jie rivers. Oomph. 1 million pigs, even those won't be easy to transport. Every source of water, every mine, destroyed. So they cannot resume production quickly and produce supplies. We need to move every person. Leave an empty jia, we will leave them empty jias. We need to leave behind guide points, but make them hidden. We can leave more, and use them to build small transportation formations. They don't have to transport many people. This way, we can easily attack their supply lines from the back. Martial law, Mo Cloud C must be under martial law. It is important for everyone to be controlled to prevent some people from making a nuisance. When there were many people gathered, the power was great. As people started to discuss, many details were fleshed out. They could not underestimate the details. Advantages in battle were accumulated through these details. Gong Sun Cha couldn't help but sigh. While the expansion of the past few years had lowered the unity of Mo Cloud C, it had won strategically for Mo Cloud C now. If Mo Cloud C was as small as before, no matter how strong its defenses were, it couldn't hold against such an ocean of people. This is the final battle. Gong Sun Cha suddenly said. Everyone else closed their mouths and looked at him. If this battle is won, then we will win. Lose, we have nothing. Gong Sun Cha's gaze burned and his tone was harsh. Final battle. This is the final battle. Kill them. Everyone roared in response, their eyes filling with blood and murderousness. Translator ramblings, it's going to be so weird in 3 days' time when I don't have to get up and post a chapter. On the other hand, if I somehow disappear in the meantime, Wandering Yumi of Doom can post the remaining chapters. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc. Please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 914, Pride. Chapter 914, Pride. The streets were flooded with people. Everyone's expressions were reluctant as they occasionally turned their heads back. Everyone, please hurry. A shouja floated through the air, their voice passing to every corner through a sound amplification seal formation. Please pay attention the vessel number of your ship, please notice the safety of your valuables. Parents with children, please pay attention to your child. Everyone, do not worry, we will repay you for all your losses. Large numbers of shouja floated in the air. Under their management, the lines were relatively maintained. Mama, will we return? A child looked pleadingly at his mother. The mother comfortingly patted the head of the little boy and said gently, we will. Really? The little boy had a hopeful expression. Great. Yun Yun said that she will also return. Then we can play together. Mama, when we will come back? We will come back when we win, the mother said patiently. Then we need to win fast. The boy blurted out. He turned to look at his home. The same retreat was happening throughout all the jias of Mo Cloud C. The plan from Gong Sun Cha and the others was faithfully carried out. All of Mo Cloud C started to move. Like an enormous machine, it started to turn. All of the treasure ships and transportation ships were conscripted. The fleets covered the sky. Almost all the transportation formations were used at maximum capacity. Jingshi was used up as though it didn't cost anything. A movement of people of such scale had never happened before in history. Mo Cloud C's manpower and wealth was used to its limits. This was the final battle. Mu Shi received orders. The order was written by the Council of Elders, but she knew that the Nether King had been the one commanding her. She was not very surprised. The two most outstanding battle generals of the Yao were her and Bing Lan Darren. Bing Lan Darren had retired and gone to create a battle general house. She was the only one left. As the new orders were announced, the Yao had quickly stabilized. This meant that the king had taken control of the situation. What surprised Mushi was that the chaos she had imagined taking place hadn't occurred. As the new orders were spread, the Yao quickly walked out of the solemnity of the past purges and showed signs of prosperity. This new king was really strong. Mushi was not the only one who saw this. The other elders also saw this. Not every elder in prestigious family only knew greed. Actually, they hoped the Yao would be prosperous more than anyone else because only when the Yao were prosperous would they receive the greatest benefits. Their resistance against the king was decreasing. That Mo king proved that he could bring them more benefits. Nothing made them obedient towards him more than this. The Palace Lakewood clan was one of them. The clever Wood clan leader immediately detected the opportunity. He did not hesitate to show goodwill towards the Mo king. The Palace Lakewood clan had an advantage no other clan had. Their greatest trump card, Mushi. Mushi knew the intentions of the clan. She had no objections. Mushi became the commander-in-chief of the Yao battalions. An astounding number of Yao battalions that were mobilized. Over 300,000 people. This was almost all of the battalions of the Yao. Originally, the Yao had more than this number, but Ming Yuye's cleansing in years past had caused the number to decrease dramatically. Mushi was not the young unknown girl of the past. She possessed resources and reputation now. As Binglan Darren faded from the limelight, she became the only qualified candidate to be commander-in-chief. The movements of the Council of Elder attracted the eyes of the people. The movement of the battalions did not attract much attention as a result. When Mushi reached the departure point, she was astounded. An army of over 500,000 Mo were waiting with their weapons at ready. She immediately realized it would be a major mission. And Mo politely received Mushi. In terms of position, the two were equal. For the people below, they only thought this was a normal alliance of Mo and Yao. But among the higher-ups of the Mo, everyone was given a fright by the actions of the king. Uniting the Yao Ma, such an accomplishment had never occurred with the past Mo kings. And Mo, Liang Wei, and the others who knew Zuo Mo's identity were even more shocked and also extremely excited. Uniting the Yao Ma, leading Mo Cloud Sea without a doubt, King was about to unite the world. Mushi's gaze landed on Liang Wei. This Yao lead the first battalion of the 4 great Mo battalions, the King's Horn. She looked at the Mo side that was full of famed generals, and her own side with only her. Mushi grimaced. If the Mo really attacked the Yao most likely would not have held. Had Ming Yuyi Darren's actions been wrong? An absurd thought flashed through her mind. She quickly came back. Liang Wei detected Mushi's gaze but he was not affected. And Mo nodded in acknowledgement to Liang Wei. We can start. And Mo admired Liang Wei greatly. He didn't know how King had managed to recruit Liang Wei. Once while talking to Liang Wei, they had discussed his experiences, and an Mo found it hard to understand. Such an outstanding battle general couldn't find a place among the Yao. Did the Yao have so many outstanding battle generals? The Mo were skilled in attacking, skilled in fighting intensely. Among the 4 battle generals, no one was better than Liang Wei. Due to this, Liang Wei was in charge of the strategy and the other 3 his assistants. Liang Wei understood. He didn't waste words and said directly, this time, our plan is to attack from here. His hand pointed towards a jie of Kunlun. All battalions have finished gathering. Xue Don's voice was filled with excitement. Excitement appeared on the faces of all the battle generals present. This was a final battle unprecedented in its size. The number of people Kunlun had conscripted reached 2,400,000. A number that induced hopelessness. Even they felt themselves shaking at the endless sea of people. This was a power that could destroy everything. Everyone stopped breathing and waited for the final order to attack. Lin Xian stood up and said with a calm expression, then let us attack. Attack! The order passed through the ranks and into the army. The army of 2,400,000 was like a vast ocean that slowly moved forward. Nothing could halt their march. Advance! 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 In the name of Kunlun. Brightwood Jie. Meteor Shower Jie. Fifth Sky Jie. Kunlun's army seemed to be unstoppable. They did not encounter any resistance. Empty Jia, after empty Jia, after empty Jia. Such an enormous battalion meant that they were unstoppable, but it also meant they lost speed. The transportation formations along the way had been destroyed. They had to travel the Jie rivers using transportation ships and they could not speed up. Kunlun quickly learned Mo Cloud Sea's intentions. They want to delay us to death. Chao Xian's expression was slightly ugly. A scorched earth strategy. This move is very effective. The other people had ugly expressions. They hadn't encountered any fighting along the way, as though the other was gifting them the territory. And in every jia, everything was destroyed. They could not scavenge any supplies. Without realizing it, the morale of the main troops was being ground down. Victory would cause the morale to rise, but the enemy's proactive surrender of land and scorched earth strategy made people feel as though they were punching into cotton. They couldn't be happy. Mo Cloud C's intentions were clear. This was an open scheme. But they didn't have the option of retreat left to them. We need to speed up. We cannot give them time to retreat. We need to protect the supply lines. Shui Dong looked at Lin Xian. Lin Xian shook his head. We surrender the supply lines. Surrender the supply lines? Everyone was frightened by Lin Xian's idea. The other scorched earth strategy meant they could not scavenge supplies. If they surrendered the supply lines. This is the last battle for Kunlun, Lin Xian said coldly. We do not have the ability to fight for long. I have already ordered the rear to transport supplies for 3 months as quickly as possible. They will be sent over in the next few days. After that, the supplies will move with the troops. The longer it takes, the more detrimental it is for us. Shui Dong and the others immediately understood. Their eyes lit up. This is a good solution. Surrendering the supply lines meant that they didn't need to worry that the enemy would attack their supplies. 3 months? Lin Xian's eyes were sharp and his voice were frosty. If we do not win, then we die. Everyone's heart shook. The sect leader's determination was so strong. What methods do we have to increase our speed? Lin Xian asked Chao Xian. Chao Xian gritted out, there is no solution for the larger force. If it is an army less than 300,000, there is a possibility. However, without a god level for protection, the 300,000 is in great danger. The other people were silent. A battalion without the protection of a god level was extremely fragile. This battalion looked terrifying because it had Lin Xian, the god level, present. Without the protection of the god level, this terrifying army would become a piece of fat meat. In front of a god level that could destroy a jia, numbers were meaningless. Any kind of strength was relative. If they split their forces, it would give the enemy chances. Lin Xian understood. Only when the enemy god level was occupied would Kunlun's strategy of numbers become truly effective. Wei Shang. He had to occupy Wei Shang. I'll do it. Lin Xian stood with a calm expression. He did not refuse and didn't even think, as though he was speaking of an ordinary matter. His gaze swept across the group and he said calmly, if I die, the next sect leader is Xin. The youth shook. He suddenly raised his head. But no one looked at him. Everyone looked in disbelief at Lin Xian. Shui Dong felt as though something was stuck in his throat. He tried to make himself smile. He didn't know that his smile was uglier than crying. Do not say such inauspicious things. Lin Xian smiled and then said seriously, I can die, but Kunlun can only win. Finishing, he turned and walked towards the door to the tent. The bright sunshine came from the doorway. Lin Xian's tall figure was silhouetted by the light and people could not see him clearly. Suddenly, his steps paused slightly. Starting today, you will not need to worry about Wei Shang. The voice that came from the light was just as proud as usual. Translator ramblings, looking back at all this, Pu Yao's race ended up the worst. Poor guy. If you find any errors, ads pop-up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 915, The Ending. Chapter 915, The Ending. Wei Shang and Lin Xian faced off in the sky. Almost the moment Lin Xian came forward to deliver the challenge, Wei Shang flew out. For Wei Shang, his main mission was to guarantee the safety of Gongsun Cha, Bihan, and the others. The only true threat to Gongsun Cha and the others was Lin Xian. The two faced off in an empty jia. This place is suited for our final battle, Wei Shang said gravely. Lin Xian smiled. There is no need to harm the innocent in the battle between us. An empty place like this is a good battlefield. You care about harming the innocent? Wei Shang laughed coldly. As long as it has no benefit for Kunlun, I have no interest in killing people, Lin Xian said honestly. Wei Shang's eyes lit up. As expected, you had a breakthrough. A step slower than you. Lin Xian shook his head. His expression didn't show any pride. Kunlun's greatest mistake was probably how we handled the Wu Kong Sword Sect, but Wei Shang said, Kunlun's greatest mistake is its single-minded focus on itself. Are we the only ones to oppose Kunlun? Lin Qian was silent. Then he laughed and flicked the immemorial Shun sword with a finger. The clear hum of the sword could be heard all over the Jie. In the end, there aren't so many rights and wrongs. Lin Qian stood up straight, the smile on his face faded as his eyes became sharp. Only victory and defeat. Wei Shang shook his head. Many things have nothing to do with victory and defeat. Then what else is there? Lin Qian smiled dismissively. Wei Shang's eyes held in reminiscent light. His heart was completely serene. Belief. Lin Qian did not argue but nodded. True, however, you have your beliefs, I have mine. Let's use the sword to determine victory and defeat. Lin Qian raised the Shen sword in his hand. Yes. Wei Shang also raised the Shen sword in his hand. Liang Wei was most skilled in sneak attacks, but a sneak attack of such a scale had never occurred before. Actually, this could not count as a sneak attack. When the allied Yama army appeared on the territory of Kunlun, all of Kunlun sank in terror. Liang Wei shook his head inside. If Kunlun had known the Mo king who had just united the Yama was Zuo Mo, they wouldn't have dared to gamble at all. The power of the two sides were not on the same level. Compared to Lin Qian, King had much better cards. When he thought of this, Liang Wei couldn't help but still. He pondered it, but he didn't understand. When did King's cards get so good without him realizing it? He shook his head and pushed away his stray thoughts. They had nothing to do with him. This battle had no difficulty for him. Lin Qian's counterattack had required almost all of Kunlun's manpower. Along the way, they did not encounter any resistance, only panicked and hopeless crowds. Do not stop. Speed up. Push forward at the fastest possible speed. Liang Wei ordered. The Yama army swept Kunlun like a wind. What? Shuedong's face was ashen, his extremities cold. He murmured. An allied Yama army. Weren't they about to start fighting? His voice trembled. In the tent, everyone had pale expressions. They all knew what this meant. They did not fear that Mo Cloud Sea would attack their rear. Every Xiuzha faction was against them, no one could escape. But the invasion of the allied Yama army meant that Kunlun had powerful enemies their front and back. Kunlun's local defense brigades had little fighting power. They could not stop the advance of the allied Yama army. Even worse was that the news the Yama army invasion would demoralize the army. This was not a trained or elite army. The great majority of them were conscripts who had never even stepped on the battlefield half a month ago. Once they discovered that their families were in danger, then. Thinking of the terrifying consequences, Shuedong shook. He immediately reacted and said harshly, send an order down, take away all sound tablets. No one is allowed to hide sound tablets. No one is allowed to communicate with the outside. Before he finished, a figure stumbled in. Not good. Not good. The outside was already a mess. The already pale faces of the commanders became bloodless. The heavens want Kunlun dead. Chao Xin murmured. He threw up a mouthful of blood and sank into unconsciousness. People of Kunlun, if you surrender, if you return home, we promise not to harm your family and guarantee your property. The sound tablet repeated the words that urged for surrender. The same content was broadcast all over the four realms. Even Mo Cloud Sea was astounded by the sudden occurrence. The secret that Zuo Mo was the Nether King was something only a select few in Mo Cloud Sea knew. The other people only knew that Zuo Mo would return soon. Zuo Mo's identity being exposed with an announcement was a fatal blow to Kunlun's forces. Originally, Kunlun had gathered the last of their strength to fight Mo Cloud Sea. Because they thought that if Kunlun went all in, they could kill Mo Cloud Sea before dealing with the Yama. But the Nether King had actually been Zuo Mo. When this secret was exposed, all of Kunlun sank into hopelessness. All of them understood that they had no chance left. Not one at all. Their army had no purpose. Even if they could fight into Mo Cloud Sea, there was no meaning. The two sides were on completely different levels of power. The effect of the trump card that Zuo Mo had hidden for so long was great. If Zuo Mo had shown it prematurely, what he would have faced was a Kunlun that had hidden in its turtle shell. If Zuo Mo was going to bite through, he would have lost a few teeth. Yet he kept on leaving Kunlun hopes of victory, let Kunlun gather the bravery to gamble everything, and at the last moment, delivered a fatal blow. Kunlun didn't even have the chance to retaliate. Chaos. Complete chaos. The rear was being swept through by the allied Yama army. The army of 2,400,000 turned into a mess. The glory of Coenluan seemed to completely disappear in this moment. Even if Shui Dong had ordered the patrols to kill deserters, they could not stop everyone. Entire battalions were fleeing or surrendering. They only wanted to return home, they only wanted to reunite with their family. Fear spread like a plague. This ocean of people that suffocated people's hope had collapsed like an avalanche of snow. Inside the tent, the wooden crowd of battle generals slowly recovered their spirits. Shui Dong's face was still pale, but his gaze was so sharp it could stab through a person. We have failed, Coenluan has failed, we have no chance of victory. Let those that want to surrender surrender. He stood, and adjusted his shin equipment. His expression was dignified and solemn. If surrender becomes the image of Coenluan's final moments, it will be a great humiliation. Oh Coenluan! Even if you disappear, you need to be more brave to live up to your name. Mu Xian stood up. Everyone else silently stood up. They walked out of the tent. Outside the tent, there were only a few that were still standing outside. Seeing Shui Dong and the others walk out, these Xiuzhi started to organize into their ranks. There was no sound. From beginning to end, it was complete silence. They stood in neat rows like rows of standing spears. An enormous troop was moving towards them from the horizon. The sword energies of the two continued to collide in the air. The ripples of Shin power caused the sky and earth to crack wherever they passed. They were splitting the earth. Cracks appeared in the sky, and there were countless cracks in the ground. Earth fire sprouted up and rampaged. The two sides did not hold back. The two were covered in wounds, but they did not seem to feel pain. They had fought for 10 days and nights without a moment of rest. Suddenly, the two stopped. The two of them looked into the distance. People were coming. Both sides knew whichever side was being reinforced had won. Only the victors would have the spare time to come. When Lin Qian saw Zuo Mo at the lead, his face turned ashen, and his presence immediately disappeared. They failed. Coenluan had failed. He forced himself to steady his wavering body. After fighting at full power for 10 days and nights, he and Wei Sheng were at the end of their rope. Both were just being supported by a breath. There were many people behind Zuo Mo. Ague, Zhongru, Sang Liener, Luoliwali, Lan, the old man. Each of them were pseudo-god level. Zuo Mo had brought along all of Mo Cloud C's pseudo-god level. Lin Qian had a powerless grimace. This meant the battle outside had finished, completely finished. Only then would Zuo Mo dare to bring all the experts. Coenluan, in his hands. Lin Qian lowered his head to look dazedly at the immemorial Shen sword. Plink! A teardrop landed on the sword and turned into smaller droplets that flew up. Master, sorry. The tears dropped onto the sword and fell along the sword. Master, sorry. He cried like a child. Sky Moon Jia. Wu Kong Mountain. The Wu Kong Mountain was covered, overrun by weeds, and overgrowth covered the ruins. Zuo Mo and Wei Sheng looked at the weeds that had grown taller than they were. Without a word, they began to cleaning. Soon, they had cleaned up all of Wu Kong Mountain. The mountain was still here, but the people were gone. Shitty. Wei Sheng suddenly spoke. Zuo Mo turned his face. I plan to build a house and live here. Wei Sheng had a reminiscing expression. Let's call it Sword House. All right. Zuo Mo nodded. Don't forget to come my wedding to Ague. Ha ha. I want good wine. Wei Sheng laughed. The two exchanged a smile. The end. Translator ramblings, and it's over. Feng Xiang seems to always build up and then it never pays off. It's more like a balloon slowly deflating than one that shoots out air and flies around. I sort of stopped commenting to your comments over the past year as my life became busy. I've usually ended up reading all the comments in one go right before scheduling posts. I appreciate all the comments, and it always brings a smile to my face when I see a familiar username pop up every day. And in reference to Wandering Yumi's note below, I really think the epilogue started when Zuo Mo came back alive in the Nether Realm. The climax was the battle with Chief Elder, the rest was just the denouement. Editor's note. So I imagine people will think this ending was rushed and lacked excitement, but honestly the outcome was more or less set in stone after Zuo Mo became Nether King and conquered the Mo Martial Alliance. So to me at least, everything after that battle has been a 20-chapter epilogue. An amazing effort by Wiki, 2.5 years, one a day every day and never missed a day. I can't make the same claim as I joined the team around chapter 70. I also missed one chapter because of a silly counting mistake. I fixed it a few hours later, but not sure that counts anymore. The experience has been amazing. The community has grown a lot over this time and there have been some big events, but our readers have been great the entire time. I can't recall any negative interactions with readers. So, thank you for that. I'm going to cheat today. You get to, because I have mixed feelings. Happy the project is finished and sad it is over. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible.